But a lot of the state and the business council's kind of working with moderates, and so he just came out guns blazing.
You know, it's scary that he's one of our better Republican supporters.
Yes.
Never know why, because he likes to tweet.
You never know from the press release he made about us, for profit under utilities and trying to challenge customers. It's like, really? We're regulated. It's not like we just set our prices willy-nilly.
Wouldn't it be great if you could be a for-profit, little captive?
Yeah, capture your profit.
Like, I could turn your power off, you don't pay your bill one day late.
We're so regulated.
How good was Boardman?
Feedback
on that contractor?
This is Heather. He has some conversations with her. This is Teresa.
Hi. We met. What time am I? Or just you go down the line?
You are right here.
Oh,
I never thought this was
Yeah, probably like
It's like, what? It's like an escrow account that actually has to do the job.
It's like, what do you mean, you should actually pay out? Oh, we can't do that.
Well, that's like mortgage insurance, or the escrow insurance, when you're transferring. Tell me, does this ever get enacted, right? It's the $1,000 in a home transaction that just seems to happen.
Well, these insurance companies, Liberty Mutual and Zurich, they provided a $145 million bond, but they had a guarantee from the parent. Well, the parent went bankrupt too, so I mean, they thought they were just doing a back-to-back, providing a performance bond, which contracted, but they had a guarantee from the parent, which is a big company, was a big company. Oh, when there's a big claim, big companies become little companies real quick. Yeah, and they woke up and they go, oh my God, this is going to pay out. What are we going to do? We don't have one.
By the way, on the, did you see that Teresa is not, she's just not a council member. When we said to add it, it was here, so, yeah.
Some of the contractors are smart to put a lien on the property.
Better one way than the other.
Yeah.
File a lien. So, the good news is all the big equipment was delivered and paid for, so. But a lot of the small contractors, they got dragged on, never filed a lien. They should automatically file a lien, but they don't. You think you're gonna get paid, just file it anyway.
Yeah.
Do you need this, or do you
I
use what I sent you?
Yeah, I used what you sent me, so I have it.
Sorry, we got business 101 here.
How many people are on the webinar?
1, 2, 3, 4 people online. That usually changes about 15 minutes.
Is, Lisa, I think Lisa's coming in person. Wayne's gonna join us online. Is that six? Okay.
Looks like you can scroll up.
Anna's on twice. All right. Wayne just texted, said he was going to jump on the phone. But I think, well, looks like that. And Celeste, I thought, was going to come here too, so. we'll see.
How's parking today?
Probably pretty easy.
Good? I guess so.
So, now, if you could talk to the city about getting the actual meter that's right there work, because it's been dead for
Yeah, this one here's dead.
6
You're
months.
kidding.
Oh, yeah, that thing right there is dead for at least 6 months.
So nobody's reported it then.
No, you gotta walk, you just walk across the street, you just walk across the street, but still, when I get there, you put them all at least.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Can you write that down, please?
Is this one
Sorry,
out front,
I didn't
Betsy?
know what
Third one, you can go, yeah.
So that's on.
There she is.
I made it.
Wow.
I'm right outside of
In the bush.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
How are you? How's the ride?
Good, but
No
warm
snow?
this morning. Snow, ice, rain.
Oh, really?
Of
Yeah.
course.
Good to see you, yes. Hello.
Long time no see.
I know.
Did you go over that windy road or did you go over the Salem?
Over to Salem.
Yeah, that road there's terrible.
Much better.
Yes. And Romana in the flesh as well.
Hello.
Council member as well. And Celeste should be here as well. Let's see. Herb is here somewhere.
Yeah, let's do this. But
Wayne and, I haven't heard from Thompson.
I'm here,
You're there, yay.
remote. I'm here, I'm listening, and I'm overseeing from remote.
Great. Great.
All right.
Yes. Somebody need to answer. All right. We're just starting the council.
I did.
Sorry, I missed that Saturday. Yeah,
Lunch, it was lunch.
or lunch, yeah, I was sick on the dog.
Good lunch, they had a good turnout.
Good.
They do some great work, they're a great organization.
My daughter's actually applying for a bunch of internships this year. And she wants to do one in Dallas and live by herself. Yeah, yeah.
It's a great,
Yeah.
great program.
Mom's not ready to whole 18, 17, almost 18. It's like,
All right, ready? I'm ready. Let's go ahead and get started. Call this meeting to order. We do intros for people on the phone. So Jim Farrell, gentlemen.
Mark Lewis, Chief Education Office.
Lisa Graham.
Eric Meslow, Timbercon.
Vermont Forest.
Intel. And STEM council members on the phone. We have Thompson, right?
Thompson, yes, I'm here.
And is Dwayne on yet or not? Okay, and Bert is here, but he just hasn't attended. He's on the phone, he'll be in at 9:30. All right, so full agenda, lots to talk about, and turn it over to Mark to give us an update on what's transpired. Because we've got a lot of legislation that's going on right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, yes. So good morning, everybody. Driving in, I just want to point out that there's sun outside here, and on the way down from Portland, there was actually green little tufts coming up in the fields, and so I thought, wow, that's great after all of the dreariness of today. But of course, as a Pacific Northwest native, when the sun comes out, I get a little excited, but also disturbed. You know, I love the gray. A lot of stuff been happening here, certainly with the folks across the street. You have an updated, in your packets, an updated list of the STEM and CTE bills. I'll send this out to everybody, Thompson, since I just finished it up this morning and some things dropped just a couple of days ago. There's been a couple of hearings, but there's not been a lot of, movement on any big impact kinds of bills right now. So there's been little things shifting around. There's been some amendments to a couple of bills. Just pointing out a couple that I'm really not on top of yet, but dropped recently. Senate Bill 441 on page 2. This is Ferrioli's a bill providing money from timber sales to fuel CTE and STEM investment grant program. So that's an interesting revenue potential there. House Bill 2412, I'm not sure it was on the last one, down on page 3 from Representative Parrish, which is around using computer coding to satisfy language requirements. Just saw Skip Newberry yesterday in regard to that from the Technology Association of Oregon. They're not sure it's going to move entirely. They're also thinking that that's something that, they're discovering that that's something that already can be done by districts themselves, but also that it could be also addressed through rules and doesn't necessarily need a bill to do that. So
that's a problem. I mean, the universities, though, don't have to accept that.
no, they wouldn't. The universities wouldn't have to accept.
Yeah, and they require 2 years of language to get in, so it's a trap. And
It could be.
It's the same bill she put up last session that
Yeah.
got smashed. So I don't know if we'll see the other side of it.
Yeah, it's not clear. There hasn't been any movement on that. And then just at 3385 down, House Bill 3385 at the very last, that just has been sponsored and dropped by the chair, Doherty. And this is the one that Don Gomes had been sponsoring previously to have retirees address our workforce, our CTE educator workforce needs in the state by allowing retirees to come back without loss of benefits. Anyone have any other information or questions in particular that they'd like to ask around some of the legislation?
Did Skip mention whether or not they were going to still press forward with their bill in regards to using computer science as a math?
He didn't mention that one either. Yeah, that's something that Washington State did last session. In fact, they passed a couple of things in Washington State in addition to some funding to promote more computer science in their schools. Similar to our investments in computer science, they went a little larger in their reach last session with some permission to use the computer science as a math requirement as well, address that. And again, that's something that can be done at a local level. Deputy Superintendent Salon Noor testified at the joint subcommittee of Ways and Means Education the other morning and really re-emphasized that this is a decision that can be made at a local level, whether or not, and it's done at a local level for example, in CTE classes, in some CTE classes, they can grant partial credit for math or partial credit for science, depending on the nature of the CTE course. Is that true, Donna? I just want to verify with our Department of Education colleagues, but that's my understanding.
Senate Bill 441, the Furrow Arioli money, tender sale, would that be, do you know if that directs the money through existing channels, or does that move it around the STEM Council and CTE reinvestment grants?
I do not know. The way it was, the way it says CTE and STEM Investment Grant Program, I believe that that's the same language we used in 3072. So, which is a treasury fund already established for CTE and STEM.
So would it be the existing one that didn't get funded, right? We have one that's empty, right? And then we have the money that we got that ended up rolling straight through ODE as opposed to into the fund and then out to ODE.
The current legislation specifies that the monies for 3072 currently go to that treasury fund as of July 1st, 2017.
Okay, so starting there.
Yes.
I have a question. Senate Bill 443 and 476 are the same thing.
Yes.
Is it just two different strategies of how to move that through the Senate?
Those will be combined. If they move at all, they will be combined.
Or
Yes.
introduced in different committees, probably.
I just think it's ironic that they face it exactly.
They do say exactly the same thing, so.
Do we know who is working with Arioli on some of these things? Because somebody had to lobby them to push this.
I don't know.
And it's interesting, I don't think it was us, so, and it wasn't the STEM CTE Employers Coalition. So,
No, and I don't think it's any of the higher ed in particular.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice
I
to know.
can set up a time to talk with him and find out where his interests are.
yeah.
Any update on general funding as you look at the next budget cycle? Is that conversation with them?
I have no insider knowledge around the revenue conversations or anything like that.
But in terms of funding, where does it sit in terms of funding for CTE as well as STEM in the next section?
Right now, those are currently still in current service levels of the agencies. And if you look at the first page behind the agenda in your packets, there's a summary from the Department of Education around the fiscal impact of the governor's recommended budget on the CTE and STEM grants as proposed by the, that's included in the governor's recommended budget. Now, in a CTE caucus meeting yesterday, Representative Reardon and others, Representative Salmon in particular as well, expressed a great deal of concern that the CTE Pathways dollars were removed, and indicated that they will be looking to reinstate them. And yeah, the other one that came up was the FIRST Robotics and potential to put that in as well. Right? Yeah. So, yes, I mean, and for those, I think most people at the table know that there's a lot that happens between the governor's recommended budget and the co-chair's introduced budget, and then what comes out in June or July or August of this year if the session gets extended. Okay. A couple of other quick updates. It was also Representative Reardon indicated that there's going to be a press conference on Measure 98 next Monday at 1 o'clock at the Capitol. So that I believe is being organized by Stand for Children in support of Measure 98. So that's just an FYI. Have no idea what will be discussed. There's also been a special committee formed on Measure 98 with Representative Smith Warner, and I'm forgetting who else is the co-chair of that working group, and they're starting to meet today. I believe at noon. So we'll be seeing on how to move or what to do in regard to the Measure 98. I think what I have heard is that there is little desire to set up a separate task force, as there's a couple of bills around potential holds to use a task force to look at the implementation of Measure 98. There's confidence expressed in the Department of Education and the rules that they've established to date in wanting to work through any issues during this legislative session rather than push anything out in the future. So they want that resolved, is what I've heard.
I think there's a number of issues been raised around Measure 98 in terms of small rural districts, not enough dollars for the students, middle school versus high school, and how you have that continuum. You don't get into middle school versus high school, and then the 3 programs, people feel like that's too much to spread the dollars across. It could be 2 out of the 3 in different conversations.
All those can't be dealt with in rules; those have to be dealt with in statute.
They have to be.
Some of those
because the
legislation
is pretty clear, so they have to do it statutory.
Yes.
Which opens it up for negotiation.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's been an awful lot of public input. The department has been great in reaching out to a number of different people to get the field perspective around Measure 98 and the implications for educators, and to get just a reality check, a sanity check. Bill from our office here, the Chief Innovation Officer for the Governor, has also been spearheading those efforts and those conversations across agencies to get that continuity, both in terms of large constituent groups as well as cross-agency groups to address those concerns.
The rules were pretty much hamstrung by the legislation we had to deal with. So, for example, with trying to career pathways, it's not necessarily in the rules. And,
yes.
And linking to the hubs and how we do this in more systemic way across our system isn't necessarily in the rules, but they're kind of hamstrung by the legislation.
Yes, and it was an interesting sort of legislation because it required, upon passage for the Department of Education, to fast track those rules, while at the same time having the legislative process also take hold. So there's going to be a reconciliation process, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it, but at some point those things have to merge
Well, there's the
Before the
funding.
funding.
And the funding.
And then there's the funding
They have-
concerns of not having enough revenue. So, you know,
So every budget had $140 million, and legislation requires $280 million for the full government.
And what did they say, they were gonna rack and stack all the programs that they wanted before that 140, and each one that they go through, well, just keep nibbling that 140 now.
yeah.
So Oracle settlement?
Oracle settlement, the funding for that, as folks know, will be going to the Oregon Community Foundation. I've been invited to participate in a small planning group with the Oregon Community Foundation to get alignment across with the other STEM investments. They recently sent out a survey to the STEM hubs to get their thoughts on where the priorities could lie. And so that conversation, we're meeting monthly with them. The priorities right now that they're looking at really fall in line with the STEM funders report, namely to focus on equity of access and opportunity in out-of-school time programs or community-based education programs, with focusing on professional development for educators, and more recently, giving serious consideration to a leadership program, as we've called out in the STEM education plan, for working with principals and superintendents to better understand and support CTE and STEM, and then also looking at externship opportunities for educators to work with industry around developing their talents and skills.
So the timeline for getting that money to the street, I guess is my question, because there's going to be a lot of pressure to use it to backfill these cuts. And the concern is if the timeline on the Oracle money is a year out, we're going to suddenly have holes in September, right, in October.
The funding will reach OCF as of July 1st, I believe, or the end of June is the first payment, and then the second payment is until the following. They're looking at a 5-year drawdown of the $10 million, not endowing any of those funds at this point, but they do hope to leverage those funds in terms of looking at other foundations and corporate philanthropy to support those efforts. So, yeah. So that's
just a core message. I think we've got to be able to make sure the legislature doesn't see that money is easily backfilling, to rip money out of STEM CTE, because it doesn't sound like it. Hey, there's no guarantee the money goes to where.
Right. And I haven't heard people talking about the utilization of the Oracle funds. I think that there was an initial perception that those would be, because it says in the settlement that the money flows through the STEM hubs, that people were assuming that it would go to the STEM hubs for their programs. That's in part the conversation that we're having with the Community Foundation about how best to support the needs and desires from a programming and an infrastructure perspective of the hubs. But that is certainly not decided.
So who produced this?
That was from the Department of Education.
Okay. So that was my concern, potentially offset by Oracle settlement, right there in top. So be careful.
Yes, I need to speak with the folks in the Department of Education around that.
Because if that goes to the legislators, they'll
Yeah.
climb onto that.
Problem
It
solved.
was at Ways and Means, yes, so it needs to be corrected. And then just two quick things. The STEMposium happened out at Edgefield with all of the STEM hubs getting together and showcasing some of the actual boots on the ground work that they're doing. An opportunity truly to share some of the best practices, which they don't get a chance to do often enough, but also engaging others, external folks. And I know Jim, thank you for being there. Do you want to say a couple words about
We
it?
had a great turnout from the council. Ron was there, Thompson Morrison was there, Dwayne was there, so we had a good turnout from the council, and good conversation and big turnout. And great conversation for the day. I couldn't stay for the entire day, but the trader picked it up, and did you skip the entire day? After lunch, yeah.
And I got there because we were presenting at Here's the Ways and Means, and I got there about 11:30, so I got the second half of the day, which was
I
really.
think it was an exciting presentation by the science teacher that talked about how she had changed from teaching the old way to a more integrated approach to teaching around science. And that was a great presentation. by her.
Hillsborough.
Hmm?
Was that Hillsborough thing?
No, her name was Sharon Tiger, something? No, she was president of the Oregon Teachers Association. So she's from the Oregon Teachers Association. She was really good. She talked about how she changed. They talked about how they made hands-on learning and teach kids presentation skills and science skills and inquisitive skills, all in the context of a single subject, as opposed to, okay, we're going to do math, now we're going to do science, now we're going to do English and so forth, trying to incorporate all that into the real hands-on learning. They were using erosion and how the Columbia Gorge was created as kind of a teaching example. It was really well done, and it was nice to hear her talk about how she changed from teaching science the old way to realizing she wasn't making a difference in the classroom with kids. Now, how do you get that systemic is always our question, but she had the epiphany. And
Verdict one. There we go.
Yeah.
And the Oregon Science Teachers Association over the last 2 years has really, under their leadership, have really been thinking about how to spread and how to support more educators, working with Jamie Rummage at the Department of Education. They're really on fire at the moment, and that's a great opportunity. The Next Generation Science Standards in particular gives, there's a lot of overlap with the inclusion of engineering standards. Really, it gives not an excuse, but I guess added impetus for science teachers to change how they're approaching science. I also want to give a shout out to Thompson Morrison, because he was on fire at the lunchtime. I used that 3 times now. So what's on the sunshine, I guess. No, Thompson, you did a fantastic job of showcasing the work that's happening in Dayton and then spreading to Yamhill County as a whole, and hopefully spreading throughout the state. It was wonderful. So.
Well, thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, and then finally, just a reminder that there's an April STEM Hub convening that'll be down on the coast. That's 7th and 8th, the most appropriate time. There's going to be a reception on the evening of the 7th, and that will include various lawmakers as well as community leaders and some folks from the philanthropic sector on the evening of the 7th, and then the day of the 8th would be also, if people had time to be there, that would be appropriate time.
That place, where are you talking about?
I believe it's in Newport. Yes.
I'm gonna make that work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make that work too.
Yeah. Right, exactly, right? Bring the kids.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that the Marine Hatfield Center? Is that what's going to be?
What day of the week? Is it midweek or is it weekend?
It's a Thursday and Friday, so Thursday night is the 7th, and then Friday is the 8th. It should be. Yes, April.
April 7th to Friday.
Is it the 6th and 7th? It's the 6th and 7th. It is the 6th and 7th. It's Thursday, Friday, so it's the 6th and 7th. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's that.
I'm free.
Okay.
I'm gonna make myself free.
It's the
Yeah,
same
I'm looking
convening.
around.
Yeah, so it'll be a convening of the hub leadership there. Okay, and then that's it.
So you'll
That's a
send
long-
out a
long
notice
update.
with the details for that?
I have previously
Okay.
sent out the details of that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so we're.
I'll send it out again. How's that? I'm just as bad, right, exactly. If I get it too early.
You sent 24 messages the last 2 weeks. So.
I have?
You have.
I'm trying to keep you informed about all the things that come across my desk.
It
I mean,
is.
there's some really fun stuff that comes in, and I'm like, oh, man,
No, I'm really
y'all need to
appreciative.
know it.
I just don't always keep track of what.
Yeah, my kids don't read my emails either.
Oh, ouch.
Wow.
Oh, wait a minute.
I didn't say I didn't read it.
Ouch.
I just wanted the details closer to the information.
Okay, I'll shut up.
So, we're done with the updates?
Yes.
Any council member updates? What's going on over in Bend?
Well, the snow's almost gone.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, we've had more snow this year. I don't know if you heard about our, kids' gymnasium collapsing
Yeah.
and all of that. And it's been long, but the sun came out this week, so things are good. A lot going on with tech space.
Really?
So a lot of venture capital
Your
in the
incubators.
area, our incubators, a lot more software as a service kind of stuff starting up. Shortage of labor.
The Oregon State campus is moving forward.
Yeah, we've got their building almost done from what I've seen, and some labs finished. That's continuing, and then Oregon Tech is just south of us. Been doing some stuff as well.
Not just waiting to see most committees start.
Yeah, well, on the agenda, that would be good.
Oh, does that mean she's on my committee?
Celeste is
Okay.
on your committee, yes.
Okay, so we do.
So we did add there.
No, I was just in Redmond, and I went to one of the high schools there for an event, and the CTE program there is it's starting to grow just like Sherwood's. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So there's some really great things going on, but needless to say, there's some more else.
Yeah, Redmond is growing rapidly. In fact, it's affordable to live there compared to Bend. And the mayor has made great strides starting to bring in more industry. So putting a lot of traffic in our area.
And the folks at the ESD and the regional CTE coordinator down there, it was great. Do you all get the CTE updates?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And I
You
read
added
them.
them. Okay. And you read those?
And I read them.
All right.
That's the fun stuff.
Thompson, do you want to talk at all about the work happening in Hill?
I'm sorry, Mark. What were you asking, Mark?
Do you want to talk about any of the work happening in Yamhill with the school retool and IDEO?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. I'm not sure if everybody on the council is familiar with the school retool program. If not, I can give a short background on that one. Are people familiar with that? Would that background be helpful?
Why don't you do a short background?
So the school retool program came out of the Stanford's D-Schools K-12 lab. So kind of rewinding that a little bit, IDEO established a strategic relationship with Stanford's Design Institute, which is referred to as the D-School, in which they took industry best practices around design thinking and applied it to the design school to train the next makers and creators for the Valley and beyond. So they really embraced that at the D-School. They began to realize that they needed to that there was an opportunity to take that design thinking methodology into education. So they developed what was called the K-12 lab, which was looking to how to take basically the concept of which we work with in the tech world, which involves hacking and involves agile, and involves real empathetic-based customer-centric design. So what happened then is that they began to realize, as they began to take those concepts of design thinking into education, that one of the critical pieces of this was the culture in which that happened.
Oh,
You still there?
lost him.
Can you hear me? Hello?
I got you now.
Okay, good. So what they did is that they recognizing that the critical role that principals play in the culture of a school, they developed a program and launched that back in 2015, starting with a prototype down in the Valley, and then they replicated that in DC, which was to take high school and middle school principals through a 3-month program to introduce the principles of design thinking, so that they move from a bias of planning and control to one of hacking and iterative learning. So they developed this program, and now it's been rolled out to about 10 different states. They asked us at Innovate Oregon to partner, bring that program to Oregon. We brought in with the Construct Foundation and with the Chalkboard Project. The three of us came together and to really to identify principles within districts that were key within the state. So we've recognized that there was a real value in developing regional-based cohorts around this whole model. So we developed a cohort out of the Mid-Valley region and a cohort out of East County in Portland's metro region to come together, and so that there are 17 principals that are now participating in this program. So those principals came together, they learned about design thinking, they learned about how the key of this was understanding, empathetic understanding. They encouraged the principals to start hacking, to start getting out of their office and actually setting up their desks in public spaces and really start listening to their students in new ways, and then start developing solutions that they could iterate on quickly. So as part of that, they then wanted to find an inspiration site. And so a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, the team, all 18 principals, came down to Dayton, and Jamie walked through what they've done to reimagine the educational experience, to how to introduce the Agile learning model, and to take what we know as best practices within CTE, but to spread that throughout the entire building so that the English and the history and health and all other areas also use the same principles of purpose-driven learning that inspires new creativity within the students, and then be able to actually shape learning experiences that allow that deeper learning experience. The Hewlett Foundation has been the funding source behind this whole national initiative. So they came out to Dayton, and they looked at Dayton's new I3 Center, which they just had opened up a week before, which is I3 stands for Inspiration, Innovation, and Invention. And it's the place which is kind of the next generation of what a CTE shop looks like. What it is an ideation lab surrounded by multidimensional makerspaces, so that students, as they get inspired in these new learning models within the classroom, can then have a space to go not only to ideate, but then to prototype, and then to work with community members to actually be able to go and actually take those solutions back into the community. Community brings in problems, students engage. This is the center of creativity, basically creating an innovation node. The concept being to create multiple nodes within a region and then bring them all into a hub. And the hub that we're using in Yamhill is going to be at George Fox with their new 15,000-foot makerspace. So now we have an 11,000-foot makerspace that was developed purely with community resources. The state actually had applied for a CT revitalization grant, and quite frankly, ODE didn't know how to deal with it because it didn't fit the normal scoring rubric. So that was denied. And so Dayton just kind of pulled up by their bootstraps and said, we're going to build it anyway. And so within a year, they launched it. So it was a real statement about how a local community could actually embrace and engage this new learning model. So this whole program concept then is to take the full recall program after the initial cohort.
Where are you losing you, Thompson?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Did you lose me?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Just for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was just saying that what...
Yeah. Internet connection.
Yeah, we lost you again, Thompson. But I had a chance to go visit, and it's really exciting. They're working with schools, and it's really making a big shift in their perspective. So it's a fantastic program, and hopefully we'll be able to spread that further. And it's really at grassroots, principals talking to other principals. So that's been great. All right.
Okay, good update. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the work there. I'm anxious to hear the progress and how it gets spread throughout the other districts as principals, try to see how they adopt it. It's good learning for us since we're thinking about CT and STEM integration. So, all right, next item on the agenda is the Salmon Camp program. Tana, I think Tara's on the phone. Excuse me. Are you on the phone, Tara?
Tana.
Yeah.
It is Tana.
You had it right.
Right the first time, huh? And my glasses on.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good morning. I'm not sure how all of this presentation stuff works. I heard you guys have the presentation up. Okay, I see it. All right, so my name is Tana actually, and I work for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. I'm their workforce development and outreach coordinator, and so I see that it says Salmon Camp specifically, but I was going to briefly go over all of the different programs that we offer in our workforce program. So we can go to the next slide. So the mission of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission is really based on making sure that tribes' treaty rights are being honored, and where it really comes into play is really with their treaty rights as it's connected to their gathering of first foods, specifically fish. So our organization works for, we'll go ahead and do the next slide, for 4 different tribes. 2 of them are in Oregon, so we work with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, as well as the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. And we also work with the Nez Perce Tribe in Idaho and Yakama Nation in Washington. And there's a lot of similarities between a lot of these tribes, whether that's culturally, religiously, linguistically, and most importantly, all of these tribes have the connection of working to gather their fish. So the tribes came together to really focus on self-determination, right? So one of the big goals of the organization is that the tribes are able to provide for themselves and to provide for their communities. So if we go to the next slide, our workforce development program is really focused on ways to help the tribes become sustainable in that way. We know that when we look through our staffing, not just at our organization, but at the natural resources and fisheries departments of our tribes, that a large number of the folks who are working there are non-tribal. And we do have a lot of tribal staff, but they're more at the technician level or like administrative assistance level. Very rarely do we have tribal members who are have the education and the background to step into those roles to be a biologist or a manager. And so our workforce development program is really established to help the tribes have a pool of tribal members who are scientists who can step into those roles to really manage their natural resources. We also want to create pathways for our younger tribal members to really get into those fields and make sure that they're adequately prepared to step into higher education and take the appropriate level of math and science classes. So our program really feels that in order to be successful in doing that, we have to make it culturally relevant to our students. And so we really try to blend traditional ecological knowledge with Western science, and we try to use a lot of different approaches. So we have internship opportunities, we have the salmon camp, and we try to share a lot of information with our tribal members. So if we go to the next slide, these are probably statistics that you guys are very well aware of. This comes from the White House Native Youth Report that came out in 2014. So we know that Native students typically don't have access to the full range of math and science courses. A lot of our tribal members are coming from rural communities where they may be 1 or 2 students who are at like a calculus level for their senior year, and so then their classes, their school doesn't offer that as an option for them. A lot of our schools don't offer AP credit or things like that. Only 1 in 4 Native students who take the ACT score as ready for college level math. I know that I've encountered a lot of tribal students who may have already taken Algebra 2 by the time they're a sophomore or a junior, and so then they're not really encouraged to continue taking math their senior year. So by the time they go to college, they're not placing into college level math because they're not encouraged to take math all 4 years. 37% of Native students don't even receive high school level algebra. So those are some pretty scary statistics when we're looking at creating a workforce that can understand that level of math and go into college. And then it says only 5% of Native students take calculus, which is a really strong indicator of persistence in STEM. The next slide is really specific to our tribes in Oregon. We can look at the graph on the bars on the left is the national high school graduation rate for all students, and then for Native American students. We can see if we look in Oregon, those numbers are less. And then if we look specifically at Jefferson County, which is where a large number of our Warm Springs tribal members go to school, the numbers are really, really low. And for Umatilla County, we see that it's actually doing better than the national rate as well as the state rate. And I think that that can be contributed in large part to the Umatilla tribe receiving the STEP grant, which is a state, the state and tribal, school and tribal educational program, which helped create collaboration in terms of curriculum development and stronger partnerships between school districts and tribes. So I've been able to look at high school graduation rates going back through 2011 until the present day, and you'll see that the high school graduation rates for other populations have actually been increasing. So African American and Latino high school students are actually graduating at higher rates than they were in the past, where Native students are graduating at about the same. We always stay in around the 50 percentile. We're not really making huge gains. It's been around 52, 53%, and now I think we're up at 56%. So it's not really increasing at the levels that we would like. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is really looking at our Native students who go into college. Only 39% of Native students complete a bachelor's degree compared to 62% of white students. That's a nationwide statistic that's from the NSF. 66.7% of white freshmen intend to major in STEM fields, with only 2.5% of Native freshmen going into STEM fields. So there's a disconnect, and I think a lot of times that comes into play with our students not being adequately prepared. When they find out it's going to take them, 2 or 3 years just to get to the math level that they're going to need for their degrees, they tend to get shifted into other degree programs. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to talk specifically about some of the programs that our organization has in place to help assist in changing those statistics. Our first one is our youth outreach component, which is our tribal salmon camp. It's a pre-college program for middle school students who are from our 4 member tribes. It rotates among our member tribes every summer. In fact, I'm in Pendleton right now preparing for a meeting with the Umatilla Indian Reservation and their staff to talk about the planning for this year's salmon camp this morning. But we take 20 middle school youth, and they are able to do hands-on activities. The pictures that you're seeing are from last year's salmon camp. We have a student who was doing a macroinvertebrate activity when she was able to find a crawdad over in the Warm Springs River. And then the other picture on the right, the students got to put on scuba gear and look at fish in Potter's Pond, which is a huge restoration project that the Warm Springs tribe has undertaken. It used to be a mill, and now it is prime spawning habitat for salmon. All of our students who participate in this program, the last several years in our surveys that we've produced, 100% of our campers say that they plan to go to college, or that they're definitely going to college, or they want to go to college. So we know that our youth at this age are very engaged with their educational outcomes, and they have high hopes for their educational aspirations. It's a really fun program. It's hands-on. They get to spend time with elders and community leaders to learn about their tribal histories, as well as their responsibility for taking care of their first foods. We'll go to the next slide. These are some of the impacts. So Salmon Camp met their expectations. 90% said that it increased their interest or confidence in science. 80% of our salmon campers are interested in STEM-related subjects. All of them wanted to learn more about college and careers. We do spend some time with college recruiters in the area, and they talk to them about what they need to do to prepare themselves to be ready to attend college. And we also do panels with our college-aged counselors and staff to talk about their experiences in college, so that way the students are really able to have rich conversations with the staff and talk about their future. Some of the quotes that we've pulled from our reports the last year was that, I learned that everything in this world has a role. If we protect it, it will take care of us. And that is a common theme through all of our tribes and their creation stories. The story of the salmon really is connected to that quote. Another student said, I have never been able to learn this much and sit still for as long as I did. I learned a lot. And we have several students every year who may have been diagnosed with ADHD or another learning disability, and we never have any problems getting them to sit still and pay attention. They're very interactive and have contributed a lot to the discussions during the camp. Another student says that they wanted to become a fish biologist even more. Salmon Camp connects all the tribes that have a lot in common, and we felt that's really important, having this be an intertribal camp, because our tribes may have signed their treaties all in the same year in 1855, and they have a lot of similarities, but they also have a lot of differences, and they learned that a lot through a lot of their language when they were learning about the first foods and how to place them on a table during their traditional meal. That they have the words for those foods are very similar, but they're somewhat different too. And then another quote was, we had so many different kinds of presenters, each with a different story. And so we spend a lot of time with a lot of different people in their communities, and going to field trips and seeing the places that they've heard about in the stories. We'll go to the next slide. This is our college outreach program, trail internships, and we have two different opportunities for students. The first one is really getting that hands-on in the field research, where they're working with fisheries professionals and they're learning on the ground what it's like to be a member of a fisheries team. So we do those during the summertime. We're actually recruiting for a student right now to work with the Umatilla tribe on the Grand Ronde Basin and do some work with the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Cruise. And then we also have another program that can be done any time of the year, and it's a research project where a student can conduct their own research, but it has to be connected to natural resources and fisheries. They also have to work with a faculty member as well as a staff person from their tribe. So these opportunities really encourage our students to go into STEM fields and at least explore them as career opportunities, and they are both paid opportunities as well. We'll go to the next slide. Some of the impacts from our trail internship. We've had 91% of our interns successfully complete their research project. All of them have been very interested in pursuing a career in a STEM-related field. 80% have knowledge of protecting tribal resources, and 80% are interested in pursuing a fisheries-related career. The other 20% have gone more into environmental law as well as wildlife. So they're still in natural resources. Some of the quotes that came out of our surveys with them: the internship gave me a great opportunity to do some hands-on research that was related to a career field I would like to pursue. It also gave chances to work with a person that is working in a career field similar to one I would like to go into. I learned how to communicate and work with others to get a project done, so really learning those hands-on transferable skills that you need in any type of work environment. This internship allowed me to see how my own tribe is addressing issues and projects to protect our treaty rights. And then the last quote was, I I believe it influenced my confidence of taking on a professional career. Also, it aided in giving me more of a grasp as to what aspects of my career goal I can fulfill in the future. Go to the next slide. We also do a community outreach component. I tend to be the recipient of several emails that include scholarships and internships, job opportunities, professional development, youth opportunities, as well as resources. And so I figured I would compile them all into a weekly e-newsletter that goes out to our stakeholders. Anybody is eligible to receive this. If anybody's interested, go ahead and shoot me the email and I'll add you to it. It goes out on Mondays. But it has a real specific focus of being natural resources and fisheries, as well as resources for Native American students. And the last slide is just a quote that our elders share with us regularly. Tribal elders taught us that if we take care of the first foods will take care of us, and that is something that we take through everything that we do in our organization, whether that is through our salmon camp or our internship program. We're making sure that our youth are really learning their responsibility and their role in taking care of their cultural and natural resources. So that's all that I have in terms of a formal presentation, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. My contact information is there on the bottom right also, if you need to connect with me after.
Any questions from the council?
This is Eric Meslow. I have one quick question on the tribal salmon camp.
Yeah.
Limit the number of kids to 20. Is that a resource issue or a practical issue of being able to run the camp?
I think 20 is kind of that happy space where you can have a group of youth and you can learn everybody's name and they don't feel like a number. We can keep track of everybody. We've never had any sort of issue with kids getting into trouble or getting too homesick because we have enough people to look after them. We want to make sure that our presenters have, they don't have this huge audience to interact with, that they're really able to make that connection with our youth, and so we keep it at 20. We recruit 5 students per tribe. I have received some feedback from our community. At times they would like us to, offer 2 salmon camps so that way we could have more youth participate. And that would be a resource issue. If we could, we would. Right now my focus has primarily been on expanding our programs to include high school students, because we have a large number of our salmon campers who've gone through as middle school students and then don't have an opportunity to really engage with natural resources and fisheries until they're in college. And so this year's salmon camp will actually include 4 high school students as junior counselors, so they'll be getting the same exposure to those opportunities, but they'll also have a leadership role within the program.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Romana Flores. What's the head count for teacher per student for the summer camp?
Oh, you mean counselor per student, or?
Teacher counselor.
We hire 4 counselors, so there is 5 students per counselor. And they're with them 24/7, and then we'll be hiring 4 junior counselors this year as well.
Yeah, this is Lisa Graham. So 20 students is fantastic. What percentage is that, though, of the 4 tribes? Are there hundreds of kids that would qualify, or 50 any given year? I'm just getting a sense of what fraction is that we're serving.
Right. I don't have the specific numbers because we don't. It's kind of hard to quantify, because we accept students who are enrolled as well as those who are descendants of the tribe. And so just to get the numbers from the tribe of the students who are in that age range entering 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, They may or may not live on their reservation. We've had students from the Portland area and then other regions outside of the tribal community participate in the camp. So, the number, it varies, but we do know that the students who participate are ones who really want to be there. They are required to fill out an application and fill out a couple of different essay questions to determine whether or not it's something that they want to do. We have had students who filled it out because mom made them do it, and they're placed lower on the priority of students who are participating, because we need to make sure that our participants are engaged and respectful of all of the folks who are giving their time to put into this program.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just one last question. Jim Pyro. Obviously, the math scores you showed us on one of the pages were very, very low. Does your program try to incorporate math into it so kids get an interest and see math in real life applications as you expose them to the science of salmon?
Yes. While they are at camp, they are conducting different scientific experiments, whether that is learning how to determine whether or not a stream is healthy habitat for salmon. They do that in many different ways. They measure the water temperature, they look at pH levels, they do surveys for macroinvertebrates and stuff. So they are charting all of that information, and then they learn about the different types of formulas that are used in order to determine whether or not that's a healthy habitat. So they are using math, and they're doing that while interacting with professional staff in fisheries.
Tana, this is Mark. You've been doing this camp for a few years now. Have you monitored the impact of those who have gone through the program and to see if their interest persists?
So this will be my 4th year doing the program, and then our organization started the program in 2011. We have not been able to chart or to follow all of those students through high school, and even some of them I think are in college now, but it's something that we're definitely interested in. It's just we don't have the capacity to follow them at this point.
Understandable. Thank you.
I don't know if you, maybe last question. How is this program funded? Did you talk about that? Maybe I missed it. How is it funded? Because obviously that's always the big challenge. You probably have more demand than you have seats available, but it's probably limited because of funding. So where's your funding for this program come from?
It varies year to year, but it is completely grant funded. In fact, our entire workforce development program is grant funded. Our primary funding comes through the Bureau of Indian Affairs Tribal Youth Initiative program, but we also receive supplemental funding from the tribes. Our host tribes put in a lot of in-kind support, and then we've received different grants throughout the years from First Nations Development Institute, which is located in Colorado, but they do fund programs nationwide. So it depends year to year. We've submitted some grants to support this year's salmon camp through Bonneville Power Administration, because we'll be in Umatilla this year. We'll actually be visiting the Bonneville Dam and the Celilo Indian Village. So we're hoping that we can secure that funding, but we haven't heard back yet. The program overall, if you subtract my staff time, it's around $30,000 per year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
We hope your conversations are productive today. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Okay, we're going to move agenda item around. Item 7, we're going to go to that item next. And I think we have Ramona who's going to talk about what's going on in this area.
Listen.
Great.
Looking at the sunshine.
Good morning, STEM Investment Council and guests. My name is Ramona Halcomb. I am the Indian Education Specialist for ODE. And ironically, I'm an enrolled member of the Umatilla tribe, so you heard a lot about my homeland. And I used to be the grant manager for the STEP program. So it's funny, if you're around long enough, you hear about your past efforts. So,
Well, I see the results you got through the STEP program are outstanding.
thank you. It was a wonderful program. Today, April and I are going to be talking to you about our American Indian Alaska Native State Plan. April, you want to?
Yes, my name is April Campbell. I'm the Indian Education Advisor to the Deputy Superintendent. I'm an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and we're just really happy to be here.
I think it's really ironic. I don't know if
Engage our
it
audience.
was mentioned that yesterday 500,000 fish were released in the Rothstein River and Snake River Basin. And so I thought how timely that we would be here when efforts, they haven't had salmon there in 30 years. And so that effort to restore Toho salmon happened yesterday, and then today you're having this meeting, so I thought it was so appropriate.
We had first salmon return up by those sugar again, in Redmond, so things are looking up.
Things are looking up. So your efforts are really paying off. The first thing, April, and I would like to start off with is asking you, April handed out a piece of paper, and so if you will turn it over to the blank side, and if you could write the 9 tribes of Oregon down for us.
That's
Yes.
great. Good for you. I think it's 7, I think.
For those of you listening to our introduction, you got 2 freebies.
That's right.
We won't grade
We
you.
won't, yep, we won't hold it against you.
I don't know if we both
Can I get my phone out? Yes.
Yeah.
Said 9. Good night. I didn't do it.
All right. So next to the all 9 tribes that you've listed, for those that are confederated, extra credit if you can list the principal tribes of that confederation.
Whoa.
It's like 3rd grade.
It's like the state capital, that's the problem. It's so hard. Husband talks about them all the time.
That's hard.
You got the,
That's like 6 or 7.
Name all the rivers.
I can tell I'm at a STEM meeting because you said name the rivers. A lot of times I hear name the casinos. All right.
It goes through my head, actually.
How many got all 9? Raise your hands.
I think you did.
I bet we're good.
Farm Springs, Grand Ronde, Slats, Oakville, Laura, Burns, Pyatt, County.
Excellent.
Nice worker.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Did anyone get some of the principal tribes of the Confederated?
So which one are the confederated ones? Warm Springs?
Here we go. We'll throw it up here.
Right.
Because the other thing we ask folks to do is to flip your paper over and kind of place it
On your map?
on your map. And so if you look, there's the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sayushla. There's the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Umatilla, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, and Confederated Tribes of Siletz. Any principal tribes?
there's more instruments, there's a Paiute tribe.
Wasco, yay!
Warm-
Is Warm Springs, Grand Ronde, is Malala, Rogue River, Kalapuya. Excellent. You know,
Rivers.
yeah, exactly. So Ramona and I have been doing this for quite a while, and this is our second time that we've had to over 1,000 educators throughout Oregon, and this is the second time that someone has got all 9 tribes. And so, whoop whoop.
Yeah.
I work with most of them.
So in your spare time,
Yeah, business deal.
in your spare time, go ahead and try to list where they are located. That's always fun. The other thing I always ask people, or I started asking people, how many people were born and raised here in Oregon?
Yeah.
Okay. So what does that say about our education system if you're asked to list the 9 tribes? No, I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm just sharing that highlights the need that we need to better educate ourselves about our own state, and for those that go through born and raised here. Just my little soapbox that I'll get off of now. So, which brings us to the need for our American Indian Alaska Native State Plan. And the plan has 4 major buckets in it. As you can see, learners, educators, schools and districts, communities, and then of course ODE. That's it, that's that. We are very fortunate that the State Board of Education adopted the plan. And there was a plan, and it was about 20 years old. And when April got hired, and April being hired was such a win for the tribes, they rallied and they advocated to have somebody at ODE, and it took a long time, and we're very grateful that April came along. And the first thing she did was take the plan, dust it off, and involve all of the people that you see on the left-hand column to revise and update the plan. And I was fortunate to be part of that process as well. So very familiar with the plan. And I am objective number 3, the TAP program. And they did a study in 2013, and they highlighted that Native Americans are chronically absent 33% of the time, compared to 19% of the time of their peers here in Oregon. So the legislature set aside dollars to address chronic absenteeism. So our first goal.
Just real quick, if you don't mind, how many of you knew that we had an American Indian Alaska Native State Plan? That's good.
That's
I'm
great.
glad to hear.
One of our favorite things, we were out doing a PD, and superintendent whipped out the plan, and he started showing us where he highlighted it, and we were like, yes, and so we're in the process of revisiting our plan with our American Indian Alaska Native Advisory Panel. So again, going back to the plan, for learners, we want to increase graduation rates. That's our first objective. All other 10 objectives support that. We want to increase CCR vocational training and increase attendance, which is TAP. For educators, we want to recruit, hire, retain a diverse workforce, provide professional development, and work with teacher prep programs. For school districts, we want to help with curriculum, assessment tools and materials that are historically accurate, culturally embedded, place-based, contemporary, and developmentally appropriate. For communities, we want the educational agencies to outreach and have culturally relevant engagement. And for ODE, one of our tasks is to gather accurate data, which is really, really difficult within Native American community. We have a friend that, so they revisited the boxes when you register your child. And they say, are you Hispanic? And if you say yes, that trumps all other boxes below. And so we'll never see Native American show up in the data. And so a lot of American Indians, Alaska Natives are mixed race. We also have a colleague that we love to share this story, and she's okay with, that she's Native American and her husband's Hispanic, Latino. So to respect both sides of their family, 1 year she'll check yes to Hispanic, and 1 year she'll check yes to Native American. And so year to year, that data is not accurate. And we understand her desire to do that, but it does show that it's very hard to track and reflect. And then when you get deeper down into the politics, when you get deeper down into the politics, as you heard the earlier presentation of who's a descendant, who's enrolled, and it just keeps going. But that is one of our goals, is to get accurate data and an accountability framework and build internal capacity, which is why April and I go around and share with other folks about our plan and about our community.
And I think you posed a question to Tanya, like, what's the number? In terms of the number of just folks who check the American Indian, Alaska Native for the K-12 system, it's about 8,300. But as Tanya said, and as Mona noted, it's really complex because those are only, those don't count folks that didn't check the box or checked 2 boxes. And so it's been a real, we're actually seeing our numbers go down, even though the census and the tribes are telling us that their numbers are going up. And I really think it has to do with that Office of Management budget change that they did back in 2007, where it does require the registration process. The other thing it did was actually change the definition for American Indian student or American Indians to include Central and South America. So it's really skewed our numbers.
You know what's interesting about that, looking at higher education and looking at the different cultural diversity coming in, there was a big jump in Hispanic students at the same time. And that's creating a lot of, well, maybe we need to bring more language in and other things. But the reality is, it's folks who have, that is now sorting that way. Language might not be the issue from a higher ed supporting the student's perspective, as much of a conclusion as we seem to jump to, because English might be just fine.
Isn't it really a cultural distinction? Racial?
It's a race and ethnicity. That's how they define it. Race is the Hispanic box. And then if you're not familiar, or if you don't have kids in the K-12 public system, I always share this story because if you don't check the box as a parent and the kid doesn't check the box, by law, the school district has to make a determination. And this friend of ours, her last name is Garcia. And so if she didn't check the box, you could imagine which box the district may choose. And so there's just that, I think that needs to get revisited at the federal level. And I know that the tribes have been working, you know, but it was a big change to do in the first place, and to change anything at the federal level, you know how that works. But one of the things that, why we have it in our state plan is because we could still meet the federal requirements, but the state can work around, you know, develop its own processes to capture data more accurately.
Of those 8,300, how many are enrolled members in the federally recognized tribes of Oregon?
It's really hard to know because we don't track, we don't have, districts don't track that level of data.
Well, the number within the federated tribes or the tribes jurisdiction that go to school in those districts. Do you have a sense of that in terms of in the districts of the tribes?
Yes. Yeah, we do have, I mean, again, I'll just, Tanya mentioned Warm Springs as a perfect example. They have about a little over 1,000 kids, but not all those kids are Warm Springs kiddos. So and again, until we can develop a system that captures or even asks that information, we don't really know. But what we do know is Mona mentioned the study. It was a chalkboard study that came out in 2013, and 7 of the 9 tribes participated in that. And basically what it was an exchange of data, which was really is historical, just thinking about the past history of tribes and sharing data and information. But what was really interesting was, along with the chronic absenteeism, if you were of one of those 7 tribes, a student of one of those 7 tribes, you were in a focus and priority school, period. So all of our kids are typically in rural, all of the kids, high numbers focus in priority schools. We were winning all the wrong races. And so we talked about discipline, special ed, all those kinds of things. So, but that study was really enlightening because we didn't have that data before.
Sleds and Grand Ronde, they overlap with the service areas.
There's a lot of tribes that overlap in service areas. Yeah. Because if you think about the history of the tribes in Oregon, and you talk about ceded lands, it's the whole state of Oregon and into, northern Washington, California, Idaho, and so we didn't have the boundaries per se that we do today. Great questions. And this is and I'll just disclose, this is a really dry PowerPoint, so the more conversations, the better.
And we also always say that this is a really safe place, that there's no question, that we would much rather have people ask us questions than being in the field and being afraid to ask the questions. So that's our role. Feel free to ask us anything, and I never care if we get through the whole PowerPoint. I'd rather hear what your needs and concerns are, and so just jump in anytime.
And so really the rest of the PowerPoint, what we did is we just wanted to share with you the strategies that this advisory panel put together, because they're not your normal strategic plan type of strategies. And Mona and I had the opportunity to briefly review your guys' plan, and we were trying to find areas where maybe we can work more closely together on some of your objectives in here, because they do, as we move through, you'll maybe see those connections. And so that's what we're hoping to get from you guys today as well, is just where do you see us, where do you see that bridge and that collaboration? Sorry, Mona.
No, please. So for increasing graduation rates, creating a campaign to elevate awareness of resources, and partner with tribes and other stakeholders to identify and advocate culturally responsive approaches to increase graduation rates, and share and disseminate culturally relevant best practices and strategies for closing the opportunity gap. And I'm really, I'm sure most of you know Cole Gill, and his first week on the job, much to his credit, he invited April and I to come and talk to him about graduation rates. And the first thing we recommended is he should talk to the youth, and so he did. And we had 6 of the 9 tribes have their youth councils talk to Cole from that webinar. And he's very open to hearing what ways can we help our students see.
And one of the things of interest that we heard from those students was we asked the question, what is the K-12 system doing to help support you? And they kind of flipped it around and said, okay, we know the K-12 systems there, or the school. What really helps us are the programs offered by the tribes. And so their tutoring programs, salmon camps, and programs that maybe a lot of folks aren't aware of, just because they are more targeted for members of that tribe, or, as Kenya said, descendants. And so that was a really kind of like how can we get more information out there about the programs that the tribes are offering, that the students are engaging in. Oh, I've got the clicker. Sorry.
That's okay. So, second objective is to encourage and incentivize school districts to provide opportunities for American Indian Alaska Native students to visit post-secondary institutions. And I have to say that this is one of the areas that hasn't taken top priority, but a lot of tribes try to do that with their local colleges or 2-year or 4-year. ODE will provide support to districts in implementing culturally specific college and career readiness programs. I think Measure 98 will really support in that. ODE will coordinate with HEC to develop strategies to increase post-secondary exit to high-paying employment opportunities.
And I think this objective really aligns with your goal number 1 of your plan on engaging parents. And then as Colt has been going out, we've been going out with meeting with tribes and just having those conversations. STEM and CTE are on the top. Would
All
you?
3 of these bullets are really fit well with the plan.
Yeah.
Can I add
Well, so I guess the question I have is the numbers are, in terms of the thing we saw from Tana, in terms of that. Yeah, I mean, the success rate in math and science is really, really low. And so are you guys looking at different strategies to get kids engaged in math and science in a different way than traditional learning way?
There are, one of the things, we went to Salmon, I have Salmon on my mind, Salem Kaiser, and their Title VI program has a wonderful program where they hire and bring in math teachers, and they make moccasins and they make drums and rattles, and they do math before that, and then they show how that is infused in making moccasins or beading and just so there are efforts to do that. I think that if Senate Bill 13 were to pass, which is culturally place-based curriculum, American Indian Alaska Native curriculum, that might give a more opportunity for math or different things. To me, I always say, because my career was in 2- and 4-year colleges, that we need to approach our young Native students differently, because high-paying jobs won't necessarily incentivize them. But I always say, if grandma gets diabetes, who do you want to take care of her when she's sick? And having that cultural connection often will incentivize Native youth to engage, or saving the salmon, or making it culturally relevant. That's a big draw in my opinion.
I agree, and that's what I would have said, is that we need more programs that are more culturally specific, and you'll see those numbers increase. And there's some best promising practices out there, but it needs to be a push on a statewide level.
And it's multi-pronged in my opinion. Like, one of our objectives is to increase American Indian Alaska Native teachers. So if you get more American Indian teachers into the classroom, they can engage students. And math was a huge barrier for me, and the way I overcame it was very interesting. They put all math levels in one room, and the teacher didn't do anything. We had to help each other with problems. And if we were stumped, then we wrote on the board, and the math teacher then came and helped us through it. And that was a very cultural, appropriate way of supporting each other and just building each other's skill set.
The insight you're sharing about cultural relevance, I think is fantastic. And as I've been listening to various higher ed institutions rethink their marketing with respect to relevancy, there may be an opportunity to, I would love to see the kinds of things you look at when you say it communicated to them as well. Because I think in some respects they're guessing.
Yes.
And not necessarily getting the right, because the healthcare piece is destructive. So it's just something I think, an opportunity where we can be supportive in our other roles with higher ed in particular.
Yeah. And I got the 10-minute sign.
Right.
Right.
I just wanted to, like I said, you could read this, it's all in text, but just a couple things I want to make sure you guys notice. One is the educators. And again, your plan, I just love it. I was like, wow, we're all on the same page. But by 2000, work with communities of color to establish volunteer networks of STEM. And one of our we have 3 objectives under the educators, and it's really to recruit, retain, and hire more educators that look like the kiddos that are in schools. Anything else that you want to highlight? Mona talked a little bit about the SB 13 that's currently out there, Senate Bill 13. Just real quick, if it does pass, it would roll out in like a 3-year process. So the first year, for the first time, to my knowledge, ODE will actually create a American Indian curriculum, but we're also providing funding opportunities to the 9 tribes of Oregon so they can create their own kind of place-based local curriculum. Some tribes have already started that. And in fact, I was just talking to the curriculum specialist out at Grand Ronde, and I think they're in their 4th year for 4th grade curriculum, and they're starting to track progress, and they're seeing an increase not just in what you would see, but attendance, engagement, those kind of things. So, and then also the students are learning about their tribe that they might not have even knew. And so I think that's another opportunity that's good for our
Absolutely. People. And when we looked at SB 13, we worked with Washington and Idaho and different states that already have this, Montana being one. And so we're trying to make sure that we're learning from them what they wish they would have known when they rolled out their curriculum. And and of course we're going to have Common Core and a template, and we're going to have tribes that are sharing the same types of information. Of course, it'll all be unique to them, but it will be, logical format. And we're going to provide a lot of professional development to schools and teachers.
Mark, are there any barriers for the tribes to reach into the hubs and be able to use the resources that the hubs provide?
When I spoke with the tribal education representatives, there was a desire to connect with the hubs more specifically, so we exchanged contacts. I know that GoSTEM out in Eastern Oregon has been developing that relationship more strongly. The Coastal STEM Hub has done a lot there.
I'm just talking, I'm unaware of the nuances associated with funding and states and do they have the legal right to access everything that the hubs are providing such their state programs?
Yes and no. So unfortunately in House Bill 3072, we were hoping that the interpretation by the department was that the tribes would be eligible for receipt of the STEM investments. That was the intent, and that was for those who authored that bill. And it was also from Senate Bill 216 and 217, which were continuations of 32, 33, and 32. So we were under the assumption that those would enable the tribes to access it. We're working to try to get a technical fix to 3072 to enable them to be eligible for the STEM grants.
Thank you for asking that, because I think when we try to be inclusive, we say CBOs, nonprofits, school districts, CSPs, right. Tribes have their own legal status. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't put tribes or federally recognized tribes or some language in there, then they'll miss that opportunity. So thank you.
Well, that's one of the primary roles of this council is advocacy on behalf of folks. And so if I don't know where this goes, it sounds like it's not going to be addressed in statute or through the legislative process this session, that you're trying to do a rules fix through I guess I would say, if you're unsuccessful, there's other routes.
If there's anything we could do to help support that, let us know. We would be.
I think a technical fix through law would be the most clear way of going, and there's a couple of other things in that bill that we,
But that would not be this session, probably.
it would be this session.
It would be this session.
Well, we can
You'll-
sort out the
Right,
details.
And I know that the early learning.
But we're clear on what we want?
Yes.
Okay, so if we're clear on what we want, then we can.
Excellent.
Fixing a lot of them projects partner with the STEM.
Well, they are able to partner with the STEM hubs now. It's just the direct receipt of funding through the STEM Innovation Grants that.
Well, there'd be an argument for something, a large tribal organization like the Warm Springs to have their own small hub. Right?
I think we'd learn a lot too
Potentially.
from, you know, the
I'll be fine.
Okay,
just the last thing, just real quick, we've been going around the state doing these community conversations and focusing it in the locale of one of the 9 federally recognized tribes. Angela has been helping us quite a bit, but what I'm just offering, if as we've got 5 more to do, I would welcome, we could work through Angela or you to send out an invite when our next ones come up, and would welcome you guys to come and listen to these conversations.
Once again, if they're regionally focused, getting members of the STEM councils and the governance committees there, business and industry there to hear this, and I know that there's a great deal of interest, but oftentimes there's historical barriers and guilt, I will just put out on the table,
Sure.
and the unknowing of how to interact and establish those relationships, and so.
We would welcome you, and Lindsay Capps facilitates it, and then Dr. Nor, we just, I mean, literally today, as I'm sitting here, we're like, why didn't we invite STEM to these? So we'll extend that invitation to make sure, to make sure you
What's
get all the.
great about it is we invite of course, the tribes, and then all the school district personnel, and then the richest ones, I assume, has had libraries and boys and girls clubs, and we just really have them look at what their strengths are and what their challenges are and how they're going to work together to solve that. And even in some communities that are very divergent, we see a real positive shift in their thinking. April, handing out our cards. I'm going to leave this article in case anybody's interested in the salmon release. And if you have a hub or anyone that we go on the road and we do professional development and we do deeper, more intensive trainings on how to navigate tribal communities, because sometimes it can be intimidating. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Please
you.
let us know if
allowing
there's.
us.
Thank you so much, and I'll follow.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I didn't leave you our card, Mark.
Yeah, I know, that's all right, I know where to find you.
Hope you guys
That
have
was-
enjoy the rest of your meeting. Oh,
Obviously, huge opportunity to improve this area.
Yep.
Okay, next one is STEM Best.
Donna. How are you, Donna? Thank you. Little shifts. And I know you'll be brisk, right?
I will be very brisk.
So thank you for inviting me to come, Mark, and share with you today. And again, it is just an intentional kind of a quick flyover on the investments that we've got underway currently. I've included some one-pagers in your packet that are drafting. They're still in progress. We're working on trying to, Mark and I were talking this morning about trying to combine a communication document, kind of more like a brief rather than a series of one-pagers that are disconnected. So we will be working on that in the future. And I think it's really interesting that Lisa and Thompson were both talking about the Redmond project as such an interesting example. I don't know if Thompson knows it, but the Redmond, it's a CTE revitalization project, the only one that's in the second year. Oh, is it Eric?
Yes.
I'm sorry. But they spent their first round of money for revitalization on upgrading their manufacturing program and their computer 3D modeling programs. And then they've got a second year of funding, which is the only project in all of the years we've been doing revitalization, to do the entrepreneurship. So they sent their teachers to the D School at Stanford to learn about design. That's how Thompson came into the conversation. To learn about the design theories and how to get students to think and innovate and model. And they're bringing community members in as customers to help share their ideas. They do kind of working with the customer. They do 3D modeling. They prototype it on the CNC or the 3D printer. they take it back to the customer for feedback. So that's one of our really cool, like, integrated models going out into the community. So I'm sorry, that's way off of what I was supposed to be talking about.
That's why it's important to continue with the CTE revitalization grants, because Measure 98 might fund the program, but you still need to start stand up the program. You need those dollars to buy equipment, get things going. So it's really important to get married to the two.
And I really feel grateful to also sit in on the presentation that April and Ramona did, because CTE and STEM and these guys, we need to continue to work together. I was asked to make an appointment with Ramona yesterday. So I just wanted to really touch on what the investments we have in place already. You can see the slide up here is what is in the current investment package. The STEM hubs, you're aware of where those are and what's happening with them.
This is the one that I really wanted them to see, is the impacts.
Yeah, and this was really what Mark asked me to talk about, was the impact piece of it. And this is part of the Ways and Means information that went out before the committee yesterday to talk about what's really happened as a result of these investments and how much a small investment like this can really impact students across the state. You can see the adaptive math pilot. While it works with 33 schools and 4,200 students, 150 teachers, you can see it's pretty much distributed across the state. The math in real life, this looks like a little teeny pop, but it's working with 122 teachers. So there's 6 hubs, and they're actually working with the hubs, I believe. Their funds go to the hubs. They're convening groups and networks of teachers, and then those teachers are going out to design integrated lessons. So that's...
There's over 100 lessons that they've populated into a shared database, and that's going to grow. So, fantastic.
Yep, and we're doing some pretty cool stuff with technology to support that lesson planning in the database, and also in sharing technology among the teachers. Sorry?
It was Ontario. Oh, there is one up in LaGrande, yeah.
Yeah, that would be at GovSTEM.
Oh.
Just ask a question on that. So I think 12,000 students, I mean, that's quite an end when it comes to data and the data nerd. These are high school and middle school, so there's not a big delta before we should be able to see some changes, right? With graduation rates, math proficiency as a freshman in college. I don't know. So do we have a plan in place for showing the real impact of this for the next year?
Yeah, again, the data, I can't, what we want and what we're able to get is really a challenge. In fact, I was just talking with our state longitudinal data system folks yesterday, and so we're on this to try to connect. What we need is actually student identifier, and to get the student identifier, we need the teacher identifier, but the student identifier is usually connected to the homeroom teacher, not to the particular classes, like a math class. So it's really hard to connect which students were impacted by the math teachers who are part of this. You think that it would be easy, but it isn't. What we do get is the anecdotal from the teachers themselves to say that kids are excited about being in math class. They want to come and they want to do their project. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, maybe we could hit it from the other side where it's something universities ask of their incoming students. Did you participate in these things? Just there might be another way to.
I know one university can happen.
No, I know one university that can happen. You're right.
I want to find out, so why not ask, right? I mean, especially if, let's assume the funding goes long enough, it's like, people say, did you take math in real life? They'll be like, well, yeah.
What I think we have the opportunity to do is collect it directly from the educators themselves.
Yes.
And have them report out the students who are participating in that, with the student's permission. I mean, there's privacy issues.
Oh, yeah.
You also have to understand what the student remembers that took math in real life. You just have a good experience.
The student's not going to know, but the educators will know.
Right. And part of being in the middle of the CTE and STEM investments, I can also tell you that we've got a credit equivalency project going on the CTE investment side of the house, which talks about something you spoke to earlier in the meeting about having dual types of credits available for this integrated math and real life types of activities. It might be a science credit and an ag credit. It might, be an algebra credit and a computer-aided drafting kind of credit. So we're doing some work to help, beat down those walls. And again, Salam said that he was going to get the message out, hey, it's all okay. It's all out there in the rules and statute for you to be able to do that. You just need to exercise the ability to do that and get the teachers and communities ready to do that. And then out of school STEM is kind of a fun one. It's a single grant, but it's impacting 43 communities across the state, about 1,000 students. Again, this is one summer in. We'll have a second summer that will be coming up here, so we should see that at least double. And one of the requirements of all of these grants is that they're really targeted toward historically underserved students. And this one, the requirement was at least 70% of the population of the students that participate must qualify as historically underserved. So we're trying to reach out there. So up next, just kind of in closing, we're preparing right now for the final evaluation kind of pieces to come in. You saw me earlier when we were in the frenzy of trying to make all of these grants happen and try to select the most bang for our buck, the investments that would really make a difference. We are just as frantically moving right now to try to make sure that the evaluations that are happening on the grounds within the projects are happening. You get going on a project sometimes and you forget to collect that data. It's also kind of interesting because these are kind of organic innovations that we might not be able to say, this is how you collect the data. So we're relying on some of their, best guess as far as how to evaluate. And then we have evaluation processes across the grant. So we're trying to collect similar information. So we're kind of rolling up our sleeves last couple of months and moving forward to make sure we have the ability to collect what we can collect and then turn it around. We're also preparing for the summer programming for Math in Real Life. That's professional development again, out of school STEM and the computer science digital literacy. And then of course we're already gearing up for 17-18. We've been working with Mark and others in our procurement office to try to make sure that the hub backbone funding is available as soon as possible once the new biennium begins, instead of waiting until the fall to be able to get the money out. We're trying to work on a mechanism to release it in July. If we can pull that off, I'm going to feel pretty proud of myself for trying to get that process smoothed out. So that and tracking legislation and watching the ways and means. So with that, I guess any questions or any?
When's the last time we presented as a council to the committee? I'm not even sure which committee we're supposed to be presenting to anymore, but I mean, to celebrate these successes.
We're currently trying to get on the docket of the committees for an information report.
Which are we workforce, higher ed, and also and Senate ed?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's critical at this point.
We've done one every year.
Yeah.
And occasionally we've done them during legislative, but we'll get on the docket for an information report out on that. And then we have, at the end of this year, a formal written report due in December. So we've been speaking about what that looks like as well. Don, would you like to talk just briefly? One of the concerns of the council has been, and the field, has been the continuity across that biennium switch of the June 30th end of the fiscal year, and just what sort of opportunities exist for that continuity. Are you ready to say that? Or?
Sure, somewhat. Well, there are some procurement policies that changed during the last biennium where everything has to go through the Department of Justice for approval. Like some new layers of checks and balances have gone into place. And we've come out the other side, and it looks like we should be able to, grants that are ongoing, like the STEM backbone grants, as operational. We know that we're theoretically going through the self-assessments and checks and balances. We know which hubs are going to receive backbone funding, at least to start out with. So we should be able to make those grants available starting July 1st or as soon as the funding becomes available from the governor's office, so that we can release at least a portion of that money to cover July, August, September, until the rest of the budget is available to them. And then programming grants and those kinds of things may also be able to be let out in a similar fashion. I have a meeting with procurement next week to try to figure out what's coming at us as far as the Department of Justice and those processes.
I was thinking more on the utilization of current biennial funding beyond the June 30th.
That's called advance payment, and that is kind of another thing. The biennium ends June 30th, and so all of the funds have to be spent by June 30th. What we have in place is a process called advance payment, where programs like the Out of School STEM that we know has a summer program, they notify us by April 1st that they plan to spend money over the summer. We go through this gyration, and they claim all of their funds by June 30th still, and then they spend them throughout the summer, and there's a reconciliation process.
So the university system, and now the individual universities used to have their own little private banking system to solve this problem, right? They're able to essentially borrow money. Programs that are waiting for the money to show for July and August will borrow money from the general fund of the university, pay it back when the grant money actually comes in, plus a little tithe. And it's actually a relatively big operation down at OSU and other schools. Has anybody ever broached the Treasury Department in regards to doing something similar for these grant type programs? And we have a huge friend now sitting as the treasurer of the state of Oregon.
Mm-hmm. I have been in conversations with our procurement people. I don't have really the position to go outside of our agency, but we've been pretty much pushing on this pretty hard for the last 2 biennia around that. We've been calling it bridge funding, but they don't like that term. But what do you do when you've got projects and programs that you know are going to go through the summer that you have to support, and the funds don't come in?
Well, it's not fair for K-12 because you spend it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
The universities have been able to build up some war chests. So
last biennium, we relied on that kind of mechanism, and our hubs we did some partial fixes. Donna's been working really hard within the administrative mechanisms to ensure that we can do it within the agency guidelines, and to, in some cases, issue new agency guidelines to cover these contingencies. And knock on wood, I think we've got it really almost, I wouldn't say solved, but we have it so much in a situation where we're going to be able to get that continuity to the field so that they're not going to have to do something like that and ask their university to cover the backbone parts and all of those sorts of gyrations. So knock on wood, I think we're in a really good place for the vast majority of not only the hub funds, but the other STEM funding going out there, with one exception of the adaptive math pilots, which will be done by the end of the school year.
But the grant review process and everything is in place so that everything's lined up. We should have all the decisions made for the next biennium grant awards.
And that's the process we're currently doing with ODE. Let's get a top of.
It's also extremely helpful to have in your back pocket while you're lobbying for money, to be able to say where the money's going to go, as opposed to just pointing to be determined later.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I mean, this was just a vision when we got together and talked about what might we do.
Look fun to see it.
It's fun to see the data.
Yeah, you're actually.
Yeah, actually got that?
And they're working. I mean, the feedback from folks next week, there's going to be a Math in Real Life meeting, and I'm just super excited by what I've heard from those folks.
So to that point, maybe I know we digress a little bit here, but then you see these great success programs. And my ultimate issue is, how does that get scaled? And when the Department of Education thinks about the successes they're seeing, how do we make that systemic throughout the education?
Most of the innovation grants that we've been talking about were a lot of effort with the department has been done to think about scale and spread from the get-go. So, for example, Math in Real Life is built around creating these cohorts that then infect other cohorts of educators. So, if you would. So the same is true with the Computer Science Teachers Association, and also the STEM Beyond School. Each and every one of those was built with that kind of design and the connection to the hubs for spread to happen and to move away from this programmatic approach, the program-rich approach and Systems 4. And so for most of these, that process is underway.
The feedback loop to let us know where we need to go ask for more catalysts.
Right.
Right? That's our job.
It seems like superintendents and principals are those areas that can foster this conversation. If they don't see it, don't stimulate it, then that's not going to happen.
And we'll be hearing from Teresa Richards shortly, who has also been excellent about looking at the STEM education plan, working with Salam to look at areas in the STEM education plan that could be put into the ESSA plan for the state. And there's a lot of overlap in terms of really the philosophical approach that the department is taking for this ESSA plan and the philosophical approach of the STEM ed plan around applied learning, meaningful, well-rounded education, critical thinking, all of that. So, are we ready? You don't need to like support the record and any of that stuff, so. I know you've been giving all the testimony.
All right, Eric, I have the clicker, don't I? We have the PDF version of your presentation. I'm not sure if that'll come through or not. I just have to physically advance your slides.
Oh, we only have the PDF.
We only have the PDF, so I'm not sure if the clicker will work. Oh. We'll give it a shot. Otherwise, you can just tell someone to advance. Oh, it's working. Never mind. Okay, cool.
All right, well, good morning. Thank you. Great opportunity. I've been following what's been going on with STEM Council from afar, but I haven't had a chance to come and talk to you directly. Mark keeps me.
And if you notice on the agenda, we've added you to the council membership.
Oh, good. Good, because everything I've been hearing is so exciting. I was wondering about that. I've been with the department for 22 years, and this ESSA plan is sort of the culmination here of a lot of previous work. And I shared with Mark a while ago that I started with the department with the Certificate of Advanced Mastery, which was all about this kind of learning, about engaging students in thinking about their futures and career paths and so forth. So come back around to ESSA now, and it's a CAM on steroids. And all of the work of the STEM work just feeds right into that beautifully. So just a little bit of background. I'm trying to distill a huge plan into like 10 minutes. So I tried to pull out the essence, and I'll try to be brief. This is the largest federal law that oversees education, and it is pre-K-12. Most of it's K-12, but it really reaches down into pre-K now, which is a great addition to this work. It is focused on equity. It is a civil rights law. It began in 1965 as an educational, secondary education act, and it was Lyndon Johnson's War and Poverty bill, and to this day it is still about that. I should say, as far as we know today, it is still about that. It is about well-rounded education. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes and expound on that a bit. This law does give us more flexibility. It replaces No Child Left Behind, which was very restrictive and punitive and one-size-fits-all, didn't work very well. It had some good things. It did allow us to really focus on all students. Each student group had to be, elevate, know how our students were doing, but it had just some implications that unintended consequences in terms of implementation. So ESSA takes a step back and puts the flexibility to give states more autonomy on how we design our system. It's not a one-size-fits-all national model. So we get to look at how we do accountability system, and how we support schools that are the lowest performing schools, how we support educators, taking away federal mandates on educator evaluations and things like that. But there are still some safeguards. It's not completely anything goes. We still have state requirements for to meet the federal requirements. And we must submit a state plan. We've been working on this since since last December when the law was passed, engaging stakeholders around the state and building this plan, and we are to submit it April 3rd. I'll just say, with the new administration, some things have been happening. You might have heard that they've overturned the accountability regulations that the last administration put forward. So we no longer have rules by the administration. We still have law. ESSA still is in place. ESSA tells us what we should do. So we're good because we're following the law, and we didn't really need the overreach of the federal rules. However, that said, the new administration can interpret the law differently, and so we are waiting to hear what the next step is. And on Monday, we will be getting a new template for a state plan, and we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And we've already developed a
2
plan.
weeks to around.
Yeah. You're going to extend the deadline?
We're ready to go. So we've been hearing sort of two things. If you've been working on your plan, keep going, don't stop. We're going to give you a new template on Monday, and we don't know what it's going to say. And we'll keep you tuned into that. Our ESSA plan is based on these 4 large categories. It is supporting all students first and foremost. We always put that first. And no child left behind. Accountability seemed to be the first thing we talked about. Assessment, accountability, the driver. We keep putting students first in our plan and supporting excellent educators. And then we talk about assessments and accountability and how all that fits into place. Just wanted to share with you that well-rounded education actually has definition in ESSA. And you don't think we saw well-rounded education anywhere in No Child Left Behind. We talked about core academics, and core to them meant math and ELA, pretty much. And the other academic subjects, but they didn't get as much attention. And because assessments were all about, the statewide assessment accountability around ELA and math, you may be familiar with the unintended consequences around the state where the curriculum sort of got narrowed, instructional strategies sort of got narrowed. It was just, get us more math and ELA interventions, and that's where it was. And we're trying to change that whole mindset. This definition comes out of ESSA. So it really does broaden. It talks about all of the various content areas, and you see STEM all embedded in there. It doesn't say the word STEM, but certainly all the subjects are in there. It's just talking about how do we broaden the curriculum.
Put music back.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? So, I just want to share with you that we thought that definition really wasn't enough either. It just talked about subjects, adding more subjects. And that's fine, but we know that alone doesn't satisfy what we need here. We want to make sure that students have the right skills and knowledge, the right attributes, and that we create learning environments that are conducive. So when we talk about well-rounded education with our ESSA plan, we're talking about a very broad definition. And STEM fits throughout that whole process. And that's our kind of our definition, our working definition that we're working with. So you can see that we can come at this from a lot of different ways in supporting STEM education. So supporting all students, in our plan, we talk about equity, of course. In federal funds are really targeted to underserved, underrepresented students. And I know that's a value of the council in reaching these students. So that's where our resources are supposed to go. And just to remind you all that federal funds are supplemental funds. They cannot replace state funds. So anything that we fund from the federal dollars have to be above and beyond what the state would fund. You can't replace the funding. That's always tricky. That's kind of figuring out what that really means. But truly, if this is good for education in your state, you should fund it with your state dollars. But I say that because you realize that we don't have a lot of federal. 14% of our dollars that we use in the state are federal. The rest is state. State funding is the major thrust here. So we still have to keep working toward getting our funding at our state level focused, and then we can really this icing and cherry on top kind of funding. So well-rounded education, I kind of described what that is all about. That's the focus of our supporting all students. We really talk about engaging parents and families and communities and engaging community-based organizations to support students, because just we know that this doesn't all happen in the classroom. It can't all happen in the classroom. So how do we spread that out and bring folks into the conversation? ESSA, throughout the plan, at the state level and at the local level, says you must engage with stakeholders. So we've done that around the state, listening and trying to embed what we're hearing in the plan. But at the local level too, districts have to bring their stakeholders to the table when they look at, when you're doing needs assessment, we're looking at the data, what do our students need? At the table, we can take a look at that and say, okay, we have these particular needs, what are the strategies we might look toward? And in some cases, that might be something related to STEM education, so that we can provide some resources, or we can provide some strategies here to support students. So it's important that that voices be heard at the local level. And we are really determined to help districts understand that they have more flexibility with funding than they think they do. And perhaps in the past, maybe that was more true, but ESSA is really trying to broaden the use of funds. And because No Child Left Behind narrowed the focus to ELA and math interventions, that tend to be where all the resources went. And when we talk about well-rounded education, wanting to bring back some things that have been sort of set aside, we have to get past the mindset of districts who think that all they can do is get their math and ELA scores up, and therefore they have to spend their funds in a very narrow way. You're doing a great job of educating the public and school district and principals, administrators, and teachers to say there's another way to help students get to improve their math and ELA and other learning. So making sure that we help them get past that thinking that they have to spend funds the way they've always funded. So we're sharing guidance on flexibility.
You talk about well-rounded, those are a lot of topics on that sheet. So how do you prioritize, or how do you guide the school districts on how to spread those dollars to get the best value for the child in terms of well-rounded?
Very good question. Question? Okay. Yeah, that is a good question. At this point, we have to say it is based on districts really taking a look at what the needs of their students are, and then providing best practice around that, and to show them where there are resources and strategies that have already been developed and where they can bring that in. So it's a matter of districts knowing what their students' needs are and then making those priorities happen. And again, at the local level, having those voices heard. We at the state level can share, and then our plan will share, this is a priority, it's an important notion if we want to prepare our students for success in later in life. So we come at it from different ways.
And I assume, is there an assessment that they have to still go through to meet this well-rounded criteria? They have to do it in needs assessment. So they need to look at their data. And data should not just be academic ELA and math data. It would be looking at their CTE curriculum. It's looking at, are they offering advanced coursework? Do they have enrichment activity? Do they have after-school programs? They should be looking at the whole array of what they offer and say, what don't we offer? And then fill in where we need to focus. It's true that well-rounded education encompasses a lot. And we've heard that from every constituent group out there that sees themselves in well-rounded education. Our teachers are thrilled, and music teachers are thrilled, and social sciences teachers are thrilled, and health teachers, and everybody sees a part in this, which, it's all good. All good. Yeah. So we're sharing strategies, and the U.S. Department of Education actually has put out some resources to show how you can integrate and leverage
IDEA, Perkins, Title I funds, Title II funds, so that you see, what we want districts to do is say, these are my needs. We look at our data, these are our needs. Now what resources are out there that we can bring in and leverage so they get more bang for your buck and not just be program focused. We don't want to fund the program just by program, just because that money comes attached to that program, but looking at it much more holistically.
A question on that. So can you comment at all on the impact that's going to have on how they're getting testing? I have 2 children myself, and they spent at least a month last year practicing for the state test, as opposed to necessarily learning something new. And I didn't, is there, this will actually.
I can explain, I can tell you where the requirement is for testing is we still are required to have state tests in English language arts and math and science. And then we could add subjects if we chose to, but those are still required. So we still have state assessments. Currently, we have the Smarter Balance state assessment. What we're doing is just reevaluating our assessment system. So we will be, we will be looking at Smarter Balance assessment system and saying, how is this working? How is this not working? What are the consequences, unintended consequences, and is it time to move to something other than that? Even if we didn't move away from Smarter Balance, we still want to be able to not make that be the driver. Right. That should just be down here saying, well, did we piece of it? Did we do what they were going to do, and how are we doing? It shouldn't be the driver. So the more voices we get permission to do well-rounded education. I don't think districts really have felt permission to do this before, so we're looking at permission. And we're also looking at a more balanced assessment system. We want to focus on formative assessments, classroom-based assessments, and make those be more, elevate the importance of those more as well. And so we'll continue to go, that's the direction we're headed. We rearranged our office so that assessment is no longer attached to accountability. It's no longer the Office of Assessment Accountability. We've had assessment now in the Office of Teaching and Learning, Office of Teaching and Learning Assessment, so that we can focus more on assessment for learning concept. We're still going to assess, and we're still accountable for it. We're just trying to shift the focus, and it's a lot on our leadership and how we talk about it and how we resource it.
Well, it felt like if schools were being held accountable for the rest of what makes it a good, then those things just got ignored in favor of that testing process. So I'm encouraged that those having some impact on how they're evaluated should keep us from sliding any further that way. Great. Thank you.
What are you looking, what is the well-rounded person, creative and thinker, or some kind of definition of what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so you can't read this circle.
No, okay.
It's in there. All of those attributes are in there. So we are talking about critical thinkers and creativity and in your basic skills of teamwork and collaboration and really inquiry based, and everything that you define them to be, you'll find in this definition. And the instructional strategy. Just also wanted to share, you may know that there is a new grant within ESSA. It is the Title A grant, Student Enrichment Grant. And it has 3 components: well-rounded education, helping safe students, and the use of technology. You can see STEM embedded in there as well. These are some things that are actually called out as ways that districts could use funds. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news is it's going to be funded dismally, if at all, at this point. $1.6 billion was allocated to this grant, and we would have received like $14 million if it was appropriated at full measure. But at this point, we might end up getting a continuing resolution of the federal budget and a static budget for the next year, so this would not even be funded next year. And all the talk of the past year was that it would be funded very low anyway, 300 million, 500 million. It should be just a small amount. So what we want to just make everybody aware that that leveraging resources is good. So Measure 98, the resources that the state provides, you'll see could be covered in a lot of what is offered in this grant. So this could be, this could be supplemental and leverage to boost the money that districts will be getting with Measure 98. So we'd like to call that attention to that. And there is a 21st Century grant. You're probably aware that we have an after-school grant program, and it is a very great program. Nonprofit community-based organizations can apply for this grant. It's not just school districts. And we do prioritize them. We give extra points in the application. Is your question? Yeah. So Title I school-wide programs. This is the largest funding that we get from the feds is Title IA. It goes to support underrepresented, low poverty and minority students. And in school-wide programs, you can use the funds for all kids. It doesn't have to be targeted. And in the law, it says you can be supporting well-rounded education. So again, these funds used to be really focused on math and ELA and just more interventions and just staff on that. But if we can find a way to show that engaging kids in other things actually boosts their attendance and engagement and learning, they can use those funds in a much broader way. So this is a really exciting. And of course, Title IIA is to support educators, and we are talking in our plan about just making sure that we provide opportunity for all educators to learn really effective strategy. So whether you call it STEM teaching or personalized learning and engaging strategies, we want to build the capacity of teachers to teach in this way. Also, it's all about cultural responsive pedagogy and supporting leadership too. So the kind of things you talked about in supporting principals could be a model where it could be used, right? Probably don't have a lot of time to get into this piece, but just to show you that we do, on our report card, we will include a section called Well-Rounded Education. So not only are the academic accountability indicators looked for, reporting indicators are not as strong as accountability indicators, but they still call attention to. And we want educators, we want districts to show where they're providing diverse learning opportunities. And districts can define what that is. But at the stakeholder level, what do you want to see in your report card? Parents might have something to say about that. So that's it. Any more questions?
Getting back to what you said about testing, I mean, you still, our colleges and universities are going to look at SAT scores. Still have to practice for that test. But I don't know if this is a goal to increase those scores.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about the math and scores? Absolutely. There's still accountability. I'm glad you asked the question because I don't want to make it sound like that's not important. But there's not one way to do it, right? If you engage kids in their learning.
That's just getting to that level so you can.
Yeah, but we still will be looking very closely at scores and by student group as well. And there is accountability attached to that. We don't want it to be not the driver, but the piece that says, did we support kids well?
Yeah, did we increase the number of students taking
Increase the number of students taking the testing?
Yeah, well, if they want to get into college, right? Taking the ACT.
Oh, great, yeah. And
feeling confident about taking that.
One of the flexibilities that we have is to use a nationally recognized assessment at the high school level instead of the state assessment. So we're exploring the use of ACT or SAT as a replacement of the state assessment at the high school level. Districts would get to choose to do that. We have to probably create some criteria and that's the way.
Yeah. No, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So the plan is, this is a summary document. The technical document has a lot more detail in it. And they're both on the website.
as is the survey. So if you haven't had a chance to give input on our plan, we would love you to go to the website and take that survey.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kristen. Thank you for your leadership. I think your background with Sim and Cam and STEM, you know, it's bringing that personalized learning, but the hands-on, minds-on, applied learning back into the forefront. So this is another piece of that puzzle. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, we're gonna skip 8, we're gonna come back to 8 and do 9 first. So we're gonna do the Oregon Talent Plan 2.0. Melissa, jump up here and been very patient.
2.5?
2.5.
So so today is about the Oregon Talent Plan, but if there's a little bit of time to squeeze in a little update about what's going on with the Talent Council.
I would like that first.
Yeah,
Well, I did actually have some
Is it gonna
slides. Well, I can't answer that question. Right, which way? There we go. Okay, so I have just sort of an overview slide. You know, it's been an interesting 18 months. You know, building the plane, flying at the same time, organizing the council, getting it up and going, figuring out what our investment criteria were, getting the money out the door through a couple of grant cycles and some directed investments. At this point, we have about $50,000 left out of that. Overall 6.2 million, but that included, you know, the 1.65 FTE for us. So we've had almost one-to-one match. Some of that isn't quite one-to-one because in some of the directed investments that we did more recently, we were looking at investing in building sort of the models and the templates that then could be shared in different industries and different companies. And so they were more kind of directed projects to build platforms for us to be able to share, and not necessarily that direct industry connection and investing in a program. But the numbers are pretty impressive. In part, you know, our projects will likely impact someone through an internship, through some training, or some curriculum development that it's looking like over 5,000 Oregonians. The biggest bump in that is we did an investment in Train Oregon, which is an online learning platform that's being rolled out at all the WorkSource centers across Oregon. So that's where we get sort of the biggest bump. What's not included in there is an investment we made last November in incenting Oregon's private and public colleges and universities to switch to a common career services platform. It's called Handshake, and as of June 30th, 14 of the public and private colleges will all be using the same system, which will allow employers to have one login and be able to post jobs and internships at all of those schools. Hopefully we'll be up to 15. U of O has to go through contracting processes because they're a little bit bigger and their cost is greater than everybody else's. So if U of O does it, we'll have all the publics, and then so that gets us at 9 private colleges and universities. The cool thing about that software, it has some great data analytic capabilities for us in understanding where some of those skills and talent gaps are. But it's in some ways like a dating site for students. They put their profile together, an employer lists a job, and it does sort of a cross-matching and pushes out jobs to students that they have a higher percentage of matching. It also gives that information to the Career Services Office so they know how to sort of target their efforts in getting students to, you know, you were a 90% match on that job, have you applied for it? These are some data tools and capabilities that, you know, these 1 or 2 person shops have not had before. So we're excited about that. That'll have a huge impact, but
Community colleges as well involved?
so there are only 2 that are using a career services platform, PCC and Chemeketa, and so we haven't gotten to that level, and the costs for them might be a little prohibitive because it's based on the number of their, you know, enrollment and subscribers. But
So I'm excited to hear about all this, but none of it is going. I can't listen to any of this unless I know what's going to happen this next biennium.
do you have a crystal ball?
No, well, no, I mean, my understanding is decisions have been made.
So in the governor's budget, we are winding down, and my position would continue for a year to complete that wind down. That's where we are at this point.
Okay, so, and there's no legislative effort to continue. So my understanding is the board.
Not officially, right? I mean, that's the problem. The council and I support the governor's recommended budget.
Understood, but my understanding is the chair quit. because he was frustrated with the entire situation, lack of support. What's that?
The chair of the Oregon Talent Council quit?
Yes, so David Childers
Childers?
resigned in January, because I think he was, well,
So my, I guess the questions I'm going to ask is
Yeah.
pretty straightforward. What was the decision-making process in killing the OTC?
and I'm not the best person to ask that.
Okay, but who would be? I mean, you're the executive director. You know what's going on.
I don't actually,
You
right?
don't.
You know, we went through the agency request budget. We
And
did
you
the
put in
initial
those-
appeal,
Okay.
and I think felt that our chances were pretty good of being included. And I think for what I have been told is that because the council is largely viewed as an investor in projects and because of the financial situation of the state, that they didn't see that they could sustain the council and having an investment pool sort of going forward.
The employment department gets how much in general funds per year?
Only just the talent council, the 6.2 million.
And there wasn't any sort of ask that would have been able to keep the council intact in the neighborhood of just a couple $1 million or $1 million or $500,000. Instead, the decision was to defund it completely and eliminate it. Yet, I noticed in the budget request, there's money aside to try to do the research for the plan, continue the plan for implementation. Is that correct?
No,
No.
the funding that's in the governor's budget for the department funds my position just for that 1 year. But then also specifically it's been described as to wind down the work of the council. So most of, as in the same conversation about the STEM grants, our grants all end on June 30th. And so there's a process of, rectifying and all those final payments and getting the final project reports. And so I think there'll be some work in kind of sharing the findings of the talent plan and wrapping up those grants over that next year. But the governor's budget does also say that there's support for keeping the talent plan going and finding a home for it in one of our partners.
Another agency, or what do you mean?
Another board and commission, another agency. So, in the family, in our ex officio families, the Employment Department, Higher Education Coordinating Commission, the Oregon Workforce Investment Board, the STEM Investment Council, Business Oregon as our partners, and I think the interest in the governor's office, at least from the policy, Workforce and Labor Policy Advisor, is the potential for a home in the Oregon Workforce Investment Board to continue on the talent plan.
So this idea of having something that has worked effectively for 20 some odd years to ensure additional funds go into education, higher ed, is just going away.
I understand. Well, it leaves a huge gap in regards to the transition from K through 12 into higher education and workforce training and ensuring that the cycle continues. And that's obviously why employers were very much involved in the creation of the Oregon Talent Council and VTIC before that. And it just leaves a huge gap. And I guess the portion of, I would challenge this council is that someone's going to have to do this. This work and push and have a forum for the tough conversations that need to occur to ensure that that kind of work continues to happen. Because it does not happen within the boundaries of the individual agencies.
No, and in fact, if you look at the HEC funding model, there is no piece that encourages the entrepreneurial spirit of the university to start a new program to deliver what industry needs. And there's programs like optics engineering, and I can make a list, that ETIC funded, that without those programs, without ETIC's funding, Mentor Graphics and others would not have those employees. And that's a big number. And I was encouraged when we added healthcare to this, because to me, from our state, absolutely critical. So maybe it wouldn't have been as bad if it was ETIC that went away, but we've identified this major gap, and now it's engineering and health and manufacturing. Energy.
And bioscience, which is a
and
grow.
The lack of support for higher ed, whether it's community college or 4-year, to put new programs in place and stand those programs up is a problem. Cool. I agree with you, Eric. I think as a council, there should be something we should respond on.
Yeah. I mean, it's relatively clear to me that there was a lot of conversations leading up to the decision in last November with Childers and others that basically fell on deaf ears. So, I mean, it is what it is, but, in all due respect, you can sit here and tell us what you did. It's all going to stop. I mean, I'm not sure.
We'll be able to share some of the outcomes of some of our investments, but then there'll be no one to continue to kind of push and share. Yes.
No, and it's not necessarily, I think it's foolish to think that our industry folks are gonna turn around and pump a bunch of money in when they are gonna probably resort to hiring outside the state as a short-term fix. Or we'll tax them more, one or the other. Sorry, there's a little emotion around it.
Well, no, but I mean,
This is a major gap and this is going away.
well, the other portion to explain to the council is that this council and the OTC were devised, created in the same time frame to solve the problem through continuing. And now we headed one piece of it.
Just
And
identify the gaps.
The short-term fix to some of our state's issues.
now, the only hope I can say is, when we had a previous speaker from the state's, help me out, Economic Development Department. What's it called now? Is it not
Business Oregon.
Is it still Business Oregon? It sounded like that they had started, even though we had pitched the OTC location to that agency in the first place, it was denied for political reasons, and that's where we ended up with Lisa over in employment. It sounds like they've actually picked up the mantle where it should have been apparently in the first place, and have worked on some of the aspects of it, but it's unfunded. One of my biggest concerns here is without the advocacy side of industry, the dollars won't be there. Which is interesting to me is that normally when this happens, and ETIC was slated to be defunded on multiple occasions, it was the industry council that would rally the troops, bring it to the forefront, ensure through the legislative process that the money would be there at whatever level, decrease, increase, whatever the case may be. I guess the most damning thing I can say here is that you have a board who has turned their back on this and doesn't feel that there's enough reason or support to even go forward and make that fight. And that's just stunning to me.
Absolutely, and I think, our responsibility as a council is to look at STEM across the entire continuum. And in Business Oregon, so I think this fits a gap that we've identified. And if part of our advocacy is on behalf of someone who will take it up at Business Oregon, and perhaps, I don't get all the politics associated with what just came out of my mouth, but I do think there's a gap that we need to support fully.
But I think that I think we need to be action oriented. I think we need to be speaking in terms of the functions in an education workforce economic development system that is an attempt by Representative Reardon to have somebody map out the various aspects of the workforce education, not even economic development system, get you spaghetti. And there's been conversation certainly within a couple of agencies with the policy advisors of the governor to convene a group of mixed agency and industry and governance council representation to speak exactly to those gaps and try to problem solve where these different functions need to lie within a system without setting up yet another stopgap measure, but to actually create a system that looks at where there is alignment, where there are holes, where there's duplication of effort, so that we can address it from the systems. Because right now the systems are in isolation from each other, and this is where we get the divide and conquer, and we get these things that then lose out. Is because they're too vulnerable without a more comprehensive vision of how those pieces fit together.
In your views, or something the STEM Council could be helpful in this discussion?
I would argue that we just need, as individual business and industry representatives, speak with our legislature. I'm sorry, I'm done.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
I'm done with the agency.
Hey, this is Dwayne. I've been listening to at least the last few minutes of what you guys have been talking about. I'm kind of curious, is there a conversation going on with some of these other agencies, whether it be Workforce, Business Oregon, what have you, about where the body of work that the Talent Council has spent, a fair amount of time doing wonderful work, is going to end up. In other words, the dollars seem to be gone, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of fight going into keeping the process going forward. What conversations are happening around keeping the work moving?
That's a challenging question to answer because nothing's official, right? I mean, it's the agencies follow the governor's budget. The governor's budget calls for a wind down, but that doesn't leave space for a conversation about where that need gets addressed. And we're doing a lot of sponsorships at conferences, and at every single one of them, there's a workforce and talent panel. And they're all talking about how education either isn't oriented towards the skills that they need or the occupations they need, or that they have, retiring workforces and they have to figure out how to bring people at the entry level up more quickly. And so the need's not going to go away, right? It doesn't just disappear just because we do. But there doesn't seem to be an avenue at this moment for that kind of structured conversation about how the purpose continues afterwards. And it's not clear to me whether that's because there are conversations happening between the executive branch and the legislative branch that the council and I are not aware of, and it's part of negotiations, or because certain decisions have been made and it's just not clear to us yet either. But I know lots of conversations are happening, both between some of our industry association partners and some members and the legislature. So
I'd be very curious to hear what the legislators that are there that were the big ETIC champions, what they're thinking.
I've had all the conversations. Most of them are pissed. Unfortunately, the one that has the most, to use a technical term, I think, unfortunately, we had a situation where some of our largest champions are no longer in the legislature. So you had Tobias move into the treasurer's office, which doesn't give him a lot of sway in regards to this conversation. And had Representative Buckley retire and Representative Pomp retire and a few others that were willing to spend the time and effort. And those are the Democrats. And unfortunately, the folks that are left that are very passionate about that topic are in a minority right now, and they have no basic method to be able to push it through.
If I look at one of the chemical engineering departments, not associated with Oregon Tech, one of the other big that I'm close to, big amount of their funding for their ability to keep up with this growth of students comes from, or has come from, ETIC and OTC. So are the universities, are you hearing them engage at all? Are they not aware of what's happening?
It's relatively clear to me that it wasn't wanted. This isn't a budgetary issue. I mean, someone can try to tell me it's a budgetary issue, but no, it's not. I mean, it's such a small amount of money. It's really, ETIC was always a little bit of a thorn in people's sides, and that's why it was effective. It made change and caused discussion. I think the Oregon Talent Council clearly tweaked some people the wrong direction, either in the OWIBs or somewhere there's friction. And they got to the right person, and the right person didn't put it in the budget. To get rid of it. Pretty straightforward politics.
All right, so let's say
that
it
would be
goes
one
away.
interpretation. I'm sure that there's other interpretations that are also available, given that there's a lot of things within agencies, and that we knew from the beginning that the fit with.
They're not getting rid of it. They can't get rid of it. They can only fund it and not support it.
Okay, so we have an identified gap that will now exist as a result of this particular thing being unfunded. I think that's where it's been helpful. We could have that discussion as an individual industry person as well. I'd like to know what to get behind that's actually moving somewhere. I mean, so we can have that offline, but.
Well, there's two functions I understand. One is to do the talent plan, in other words, to identify where the gaps are, where the opportunities and jobs are. That's one function. The other one was to really fund programs that there was a gap where we needed startup money to really develop a skill set. And that's a different function. So I think those two are both valid things. The question is where do those two reside, or can they reside at all?
Well, yeah, and the plan can still be done for $250,000 buying into it, right? I mean, that research, or if you picked up by another agency, that, I mean, it should be being done.
Yeah.
The real question, why isn't it being done
Anyway.
on a base budget, right?
That should be.
But the granting funds are always going to come off new money, not existing money.
Right.
And that's the issue is I think people don't realize by disconnecting this from industry, like they have by eliminating the council, you disconnect the advocacy within the legislative branch and you disconnect those new dollars. And that's the piece that's going to disappear. Just like this council and our budget, we don't have industry out there ready to throw a tantrum, it would get whittled down to zero. So that's my concern, is where you've broken the advocacy piece, and my concern is, how many times do you do that before the folks stop advocating?
That's probably where Melissa wanted this conversation to go.
Melissa,
she got volunteered. We appreciate it.
No,
She's in an awkward spot, obviously.
I don't think so at all. She's the executive director of this organization. I mean, this is your job. Take it back. Take it back that Eric's pissed at least, and at least he's a little angry. And I think, the fundamental issue here is you're going to blow something up, then have a plan when you blow something up. And if you don't have a plan, you won't.
Okay, so speaking of a plan, so the unique approach, just that the council really saw its investment strategy as having sort of a long-term biennial impact. I'll set there, but really the councilors, in terms of the sense the decision has been made, they have really focused on that there is that ongoing need, and it is that voice for industry. It is about doing the talent plan. It is about continuing to engage all of you and the HAC and the Oregon Workforce Investment Board about how we're doing our other work in ways that address the gaps in the plan, and that voice piece, yes, is slated to go away. Talent plan is the key piece of it. To a certain extent, because of the way that the council's work has changed, it isn't just about higher education, largely because of that 80% statistic, which is 80% of the workers we're going to need in 10 years are already working today, and if they are underskilled or because of the way technology is changing, they're not going to have the skills we're going to need 10 years from now. We have to figure out how to make that happen through some other innovative ways of on-the-job training, of quicker kind of turnaround in terms of upskilling, upgrading, reskilling of folks. And so what we want in the talent plan, in addition to focusing on those 5 industries and largely professional and technical occupations, is to, look at those trends, to be able to, so that, the whole point of the plan is it's based on the data that's available, either from industry or from the employment department, and then includes a lot of industry validation and conversations with industry about what we're not seeing in the data, what's emerging, what's evolving. And this time, so we've done one, and you have the executive summary of that one, and it was done in, 6 weeks, I think, in the first version. We now have 5 months. Not a whole lot of time, but a lot more than 6 weeks. And so are trying to do a more deliberate process in terms of industry engagement, but also looking sort of more broadly at components of the plan. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you today was to make sure that in what we've proposed, the plan will encompass pieces of information, whether it's the data, the best practices, information around investment opportunities that can benefit you in your work, right? So that it's not just about the Talent Council and its investment portfolio, whether it exists or doesn't exist, but how can this help STEM Investment Council in the work that you do going forward, so that at least for the next 2 years, you have a basis of some information about these needs from industry in Oregon to help guide your work.
Will it identify education tracks or gaps that, to Lisa's point or to Eric's point, that there's these needs for industry has these needs. There are no programs that provide that need right now.
Yeah.
And if they were started up, developed, seeded, they actually could produce Oregonians into real paying jobs. I just think we need...
Bullet 4, yeah.
Okay.
I think we're trying to look at that. That's like a story I hear for AR and VR all the time, which is it's a growing industry, but there's no curriculum in Oregon that puts the right pieces together.
And can that become an advocacy piece then to try to fund those programs that through some type of legislation. I know it's gonna have, where's it gonna come from, but these are things.
Who
that
will then
come
do
from the
it?
jobs,
Who's gonna
but-
stand up and ask for it? You mentioned that you're staying on staff. Are you using an outside consultant in regards to the talent planning?
We are, and I didn't cover that. We have contracted with TIP Strategies based out of Austin, Texas, and they're partnering with Scruggs and Associates, which is Pat Scruggs, as you all know, who wrote the first plan. And so it's sort of a nice balance between some of the larger kind of economic analysis and data analysis capabilities of TIP Strategies with some Oregon connections and historical knowledge. Yes.
All right. We're gonna have to move on.
Keep my mouth shut on that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess from the council, probably back to your board and stuff, is this is an important function. The board needs to understand that either it needs to advocate for this moving forward or find a place where it continues, because this is an important gap that we see in terms of an opportunity missed by our state. So, we can only do what we can do from this side, but clearly the board needs to understand that this is important to the state. How do they move that forward? Not just sit and accept it. So, I don't know what to say.
Hello, this is Dwayne again. I got a quick procedural question since I'm the STEM Investment Council's representative on the Talent Council. I'm curious what the boundaries of what I can say about this are. In other words, I'm not actually on the council. I'm an ex officio. If I advocate for the Talent Council and its work, can I do that from the STEM Investment Council perspective? Do I have to do that from a private citizen's perspective? What would that look like?
I think the recognition for these kinds of advisory councils is that we understand that the membership wear a number of different hats. And in terms of, we're stood up as part of the agencies and follow the governor's recommended budgets in that regard, but we recognize that you have other roles that you play, and as private citizens.
But I would also say, I'm going to go with that on a limb. I mean, the STEM Council has a view here. We're an independent board. I think our view is this is an important function and important information and important funding of things that connect what we're trying to do at the local level to ultimate jobs, high-paying, high-wage demand jobs, high-demand jobs. So I don't have a problem, Dwayne, as a member of the STEM Council, having the STEM Council say what we just talked about here, which is this is an important function and the board needs to figure out how to figure out a continuum of this thing. So.
I happen to agree. Procedurally, we have to vote on such a thing, let me know. But this is part of the identified plan if you look at our table.
I think perhaps a conversation with the governor's policy advisors would be an appropriate step to take and perhaps the most direct step.
So Dwayne, you have full license I don't see anyone on the STEM Council. We're not going to take a vote on this, but I think we see the importance of this function and this work to continue, and so you can carry that message to that board and reflect that as much as you want.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you, Dwayne. It's fantastic.
And in the interim, I think,
same.
to the extent we can be helpful as the board tries to move that forward to whatever organization that you have a conversation with, whether it's policy advisors or whatever, we're more than happy to engage in that and explain the connectivity we're doing and what they're doing. So, thank you. I think we're going to have to move anytime.
I get it. Yeah. So if there's anything from, there are a couple of slides that talk about that, kind of framing questions and what we're trying to do. If there's an obvious gap to all of you that would help you, let me know. Send me an email.
One last, just quick question, just
Yes.
for the record. What was the appropriation for the next biennium that you guys are seeking for the continuation of the plan?
Wow.
200 and some thousand, wasn't it?
The governor's recommended budget includes, I think it's 152,000 of general fund. But can we talk later?
Just send me an email if you would, please.
Let's talk later.
And have you determined, assuming this thing was to continue, let's say it were to continue, you look at the demand from what you learned in the last biennium and the opportunities for improvement, what type of number would you guys ask the legislature for to continue the good work you're doing?
That question I can answer. Based on the analysis of the unmet need from our grant cycles and projection of expanding and scaling the investments we made this biennium, I think we could easily invest $10 million in big projects next biennium.
Which was, by the way, the original amount of money that we were scheduled to get last biennium.
Yeah, and if I look at what each of the institutions that would likely receive those funds would be doing with them, there being critical gaps.
Yeah, and there was a leveraging portion of that too. They were supposed to go out and get.
Are you going to lose any programs that got started under this initial phase because they won't have continuation of funding?
Well, so it's a distinction between, the legislation was very clear around
Yeah,
sort of
started,
time-limited
yeah,
projects,
right.
right? Some very discrete things. And in all of our criteria, we were looking at the ability to self-sustain
Right.
beyond the Talent Council's investment, because we did not intend these, I think reaction to ETIC, right? Not have them ongoing investments. But some of the models we invested in this biennium could use some additional resources to take them to new geography. Some of the work we're doing in the Oregon Bioscience Association, developing a professional skills curriculum model, could be adopted by the manufacturing sector in the Rogue Valley, because they're looking for that kind of program, and probably could use some cash in helping to implement that, right?
And I can say with confidence that those were really well done, looking at limited, get them on their feet. The issue I see is that with the money for higher ed that's in the governor's budget, with increased PERS and other things hitting, it's not that they're likely to be the things that aren't quite going far enough, fast enough that our institutions will either cut or the tuition is going to be. So.
Okay, we got to move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa. Thank you. I appreciate it. STEM committees, we're not gonna have time. We have public comment?
We do.
Okay, let me just quickly go through this. We're gonna have a data and metrics subcommittee meeting this afternoon.
At 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock here in this meeting for those who are just dying to learn about metrics, and I'll
We
be
have
there.
an agreement to stand up an equity committee.
Yeah,
We
right.
do a quick vote to stand one up.
Yes, is there a motion to create an equity subcommittee?
So motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank
All
you.
right. Opposed? Okay, that's been approved, and we can set
Like the
that
chair.
up. Who knows, we can, we have.
We can do that offline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The committee can decide who's going to chair that effort, so. The other committee, I think the strategic plan work is completed at this point, albeit we'll have to see how it transitions. If 297 goes forward, and we create a CT STEM council joint, we may have to go back and brush up the strategic plan to adequately incorporate CT into the document. So,
Yes.
and communications, as always.
It's here in the middle of the session, obviously, I think, for the most part, the communications to the point we had earlier, is we have a phenomenal set of data. One sheet's now created by ODE. Great, we now need to get that to in front of the right people. The people that are going to be making the hard decisions here in a few months on where the money goes.
We need to show the progress we're making to be able to tell the story.
And just, point of order, for better numbers, we can advocate in a much different manner than the members of the ODE can do. So, we need
Very good. Okay, so those are our committee reports, and we'll see where all goes, and I'm looking forward to meeting with the legislators to talk about our progress. Public comment.
Don has already spoken.
Don has already spoken, so she's.
Oh, did I stand up on the wrong place?
Public testimony. Thank you. Like to say anything more? All right.
Anything else that we want to raise or talk about? Good meeting, I think a lot of good content, a lot of good things happening. Really excited about the progress we're making with the grants. I think it's been a great partnership. The hubs continue to do it well. The assessment on the hubs, is that going to be completed for the April STEM hub?
There's an interim report that has, I think it's almost finalized, and I'll get that out to folks. But again, that's interim. The final on that won't be happening until July.
Is there a chance that town gets shared at the
Yes.
April?
So, well, the interim one is that there's still follow-up to share the data from that report with the STEM hubs themselves, and that's, I think, an important step. We spoke about bringing that to the hubs in the April convening as well.
Thanks for the spirited conversation. Lisa, I'd love to have you here and get your blood boiling. That was good to see you.
Like you saw.
Age.
Thank you.
Remember your cursing. All right, thank you all.
Gavel out. Oh.
Make sure you guys got it. Thank you very much.
Still stand